So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to. So we are back with a brand new movie on What If Naruto Wants Private Photos of Charlie and Kushina movie, but before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. The road to hell. It was late at night deep within a lush forest, the forest floor drenched in darkness under the thick canopy of leaves. The few rays of moonlight that could pierce through weakly lit up the forest floor, revealing lush grassy ground. Oddly though, there was not a sound to be heard. No owls hooting or insects chirping. Only the pure serene silence of a calm peaceful forest. Or at least that was the case before 5 swirls of blood-red fire burst into life out of seemingly nowhere. The mysterious flames lit up the once darkened landscape and scorched the land as they spread out towards each other, swiftly coalescing to form a perfect circle before branching out inside to create a 5-point star. As soon as it was done, several runic symbols appeared within the spaces between the flames before a swirling vortex of dark fire sprung into existence in the air directly above the exact center of it all. Not even a second after its creation, a leg with a black and white heeled shoe and light red pants shot out and stomped into the ground with enough force to send several cracks across the ground. "I can't believe him," a feminine voice shouted out angrily as the leg's owner followed through the portal, revealing a lovely, if not unusual-looking, woman. Dressed in a fancy red tuxedo, she was incredibly tall, at least 6 feet, but was still quite slender, with long blonde hair and pale starch white skin aside from 2 bright red circles on her cheeks that made it seem like she was constantly blushing. Her eyes, locked in a withering glare, were a pure red with no pupils to be seen amidst yellow sclera, and a pair of sharp fangs peeked out from the top of her mouth as her lips curled up in a snarl. This was Charlie Morningstar, the sole daughter of Lucifer, the princess of hell, and at the moment one incredibly pissed off demon. "Of all things, he wants me to do something like that," she screamed out in anger and disbelief as she grabbed the sides of her head, grabbing fistfuls of her hair as she trudged through the forest. She didn't even seem to care as the portal she'd come through fizzled out behind her without a trace, with even the burned grass having somehow grown back already. Instead, the furious princess of the underworld just continued onwards in a blind fury until she found herself standing in front of a tremendously large oak tree. Growling lowly under her breath, she reared back her arm as hellfire gathered around her fist. Before the limb dropped back to her side, the demonic flames sputtering out as she smacked her face into the tree instead. Soft crying rang out as Charlie's shoulders started to shake, the demoness briefly raising her head back up to show her tear-stained cheeks before slamming it back into the tree. This was repeated several times, each blow caving in the wood a little bit further until there was a near-perfect indent of her face left in the bark. "This isn't fair. I worked so hard to set everything up, and now Dad decides to just drop this on me? It's bullshit," she swore between sobs, tears leaking out from the indentation in the tree bark and onto her shoulders as the memory of her recent conversation with her father played through her mind. Earlier that day, "I'm sorry, sweetie, but I cannot allow you to continue with this little rehabilitation project of yours any longer." Sitting in his throne with a completely remorseless look on his face, Lucifer watched on apathetically as his daughter stared at him in shock and disbelief. But Dad," Charlie stuttered out as she tried to approach her father, only to freeze when fixed her with a pointed look. "I don't you understand. You've never had a problem before. Why now?" "Because as the princess of hell, and as my daughter, you should be setting an example of corruption and despair, not this foolishness about redemption," the ruler of hell said, scoffing softly at the end as he raised a glass of wine to his lips and took a generous sip. "I have tolerated your behavior for decades, believing it was just a phase, simple teenage rebellion that you would grow out of eventually. Yet here you are, almost 200 years old now, and yet still you act like a mere child." "I'm not." "Yes, you are." Lucifer cut Charlie off firmly as he was briefly enveloped in a pitch-black aura that caused shivers to run down the girl's spine. When it cleared, the fallen angel snapped his fingers, prompting a nervous-looking imp servant to quickly hurry forward with a fresh glass of wine on a tray. "Not only do you insist on continuing with this fool's errand of yours, but now you've begun to drag my reputation down with you. Already, rumors spread throughout the 9 rings. Whispers amongst the royal families of how my child is but a naive, weak-hearted failure who has yet to claim even a single soul to her name." That last part caused Charlie to flinch before her gaze dropped to the floor, unable to refute what her father had said. For higher-class demons, the amount of souls they owned, actual damned souls and not the paper currency, was an important symbol of power and strength. It was even a tradition in some families to take one's children up to claim their first soul as a sort of coming-of-age thing. And generally by her age, most would be reaching at least the higher double digits already, if not the low hundreds. So, to not have even a single one yet would be considered absolutely fucking embarrassing, to put lightly. "I don't get why that's such a big deal still." Raising her head back up as she crossed her arms, Charlie stood her ground as she stared Lucifer in the eye. Hell already has too many souls in it in the first place. That's why you had to agree those barbaric exterminations each year in the first place. Thousands of souls are being wiped out of existence each year for no other reason than we don't have enough room to keep them all here. True, her father admitted, nodding slowly as he slowly swirled his new glass, staring at the crimson liquid sloshing inside. But that doesn't change the facts, and the fact is. Suddenly the man's hand shot out and grabbed his servant by the neck before snapping it with a sickening crunch, making Charlie flinch again as its head lolled back to face her. She couldn't help but step back when he let the now dead imp drop to the floor, its body flopping limply against the ground with a dribble of blood and sputum oozing out of its mouth. This is hell, where the strong flourish and the weak are left in the trash where they belong. As he spoke, Lucifer snapped his fingers again, causing two more imps to appear who promptly gathered their dead comrade and dragged him away. Whilst they were doing that, the Demon King himself rose from his seat and approached his daughter, his steps slow and graceful, exuding power. Once he was close enough, he reached out with his empty hand and gently stroked the girl's cheek. Charlie recoiled a little at first but slowly found herself sinking into his touch as a feeling of comfort washed over her. "I love you, sweetie. You are one of the most precious things in the entire underworld to me, and I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you," he said softly, a small genuine smile appearing on his lips for but a moment, before returning to a calm apathy. "So please understand why I'm doing this." "What are you?" Charlie had no time to fully ask what he meant by that before she felt something grab her hand and an intense searing pain shot up her arm. Stumbling back in shock, her gaze snapped down to see her father's once goblet-holding hand intertwined with hers as a malicious red aura flowed from his palm into her flesh. "Dad, what are you doing? You're hurting me." Lucifer remained silent and simply tightened his grip as Charlie frantically tried to escape his grasp, his expression unchanging even when she fell to her knees screaming from the pain. It wasn't until every last flicker of magic had seeped into her arm that he finally let her go and returned to his throne, leaving the younger blonde whimpering where she lay. Clutching her trembling arm as the pain slowly ebbed away, Charlie could only stare in horror at the runic symbols that had been seared into the pale skin of her palm. "And no, you didn't, Daddy, please." A soul contract, her father had put her in a soul contract. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but you forced my hand in this," her father stated once he retook his seat and knitted his fingers together. "If you insist on continuing with this foolish dream of yours, then you must claim at least one living soul under your power within the next 12 hours. "No, I won't, you can't make me, Dad, please," Charlie pleaded, her eyes watering as the reality of what Lucifer had done came crashing down on her. "If you fail to do so, then you will never speak of and never attempt any form of rehabilitation of damned souls for the rest of your life," he finished regardless before snapping his fingers again, summoning forth two towering demonic beast men who grabbed Charlie on either side and led her out of the room. Present, she had gone from leaning her face into the tree to sitting against it, her back pressed against the bark as she looked at the moon through an opening in the canopy. Dried tear stains were on her face, but she had a small scowl as she dropped her gaze to the runic marking on her palm. She couldn't believe that her father would do something as horrible as force her into a soul contract like this, and with such unfair stipulations either. Either she personally damned a soul, which was against everything she stood for, or be forced to give up her dream forever. She wouldn't even be able to say the word redemption. Literally, the contract would stop her from speaking if she tried. "Damn you, Dad, how could you ask me to do this? To damn someone just to prove a point?" she muttered before sighing in frustration and getting to her feet. "I can't just sit here and mope. I need to take action, no matter how much I hate it." With that said, she expanded her senses to try and feel out the nearest coalescence of life sources in her vicinity. If she was going to make a deal with someone, and thereby drag them to hell with her, she would need to observe the local humans in the area and choose one properly. Her plan was to find someone who was already on the track to going to hell, hoping to lessen the guilt she was feeling about damning someone. If they accepted her deal, she could then immediately check them into her happy hotel and rehabilitate them so that they could go to heaven. She does what her father demands, she gets him to support her goals, and she proves those goals are possible all in one fell swoop. What could go wrong? And, I jinxed it, she deadpanned in her head as she felt 4 souls near her position. Correction. 3. One of them passed on almost as soon as she sensed it, and she wished them a peaceful afterlife. Another one was also dying based on what she could feel, but whoever it was defiantly clinging to life with everything they had. It was the last 2 that got her attention the most though. One was young and vibrant, with a delicate purity that could only belong to a young child, whilst the other was so filled of rage and hatred that Charlie was almost certain it was a wrath demon of some kind. What was alarming though was just how close the 2 souls were, to the point they were almost intertwined with each other somehow. Officially worried about the malicious soul and the newborn, Charlie made her way to the life sources, passing by foliage and brush before breaking through into a massive clearing that looked like it had been subject to a massive battle. The ground was cratered in various locations, the largest of which were positioned in a way that told her that an extremely massive creature had been standing on them. Whatever it was seemed to be gone now, which Charlie was grateful for. She did not like the idea of facing off against something that left an 80-foot wide footprint. Shaking off those thoughts, she spotted 2 adult humans lying on the ground before an ritualistic altar that had a crying baby perched on it in a swaddled cradle. One of the humans, a young blonde man, lied motionless, no doubt the soul that Charlie had sensed passing on, whilst the other human, a lovely red-headed woman, was weakly dragging her body towards the altar, leaving a thick bloody smear across the ground in her wake. Approaching cautiously at first, the demon princess's eyes widened once she got closer when she saw that both of the adults had been run through by something so massive that it left a hole bigger than her head clean through their torsos. Gasping in concern, all thoughts of her father's order vanished into the back of her mind as she rushed over to help the struggling woman. "Miss, are you okay?" she asked, knowing it was a stupid question, but too alarmed by what she had come across. Grabbing the woman's hand when she got no response, Charlie was alarmed to feel how fast her life force was draining away. "Hang on, I'll help you. Just hold on." She carefully turned the woman onto her back, barely biting back a gag when she saw the blood and tissue dangling from the gaping hole, before trying to use healing magic to close up the wound. Unfortunately, Charlie wasn't exactly the most well-versed when it came to such spells, and the most she was able to do was staunch the bleeding, buying the woman a few precious extra minutes of life. Kushina Uzumaki, the name popped in her mind as soon as she made contact, coughed up blood as she weakly turned her head as much as she could to the altar. Naru, she choked out, getting Charlie's attention. Assuming the woman was referring to the still crying baby and that said baby was her son, based on the dead blonde man's features, Hell's princess assured the redhead, "Don't worry. Your son's fine, miss. You can hold him after I patch you up." Who are you?" Kushina asked, feeling a modicum of strength return, though it was quickly leaving her again. "I'm Charlie. Now don't speak please, save your strength." She kept trying to heal the woman, but wounds like these were simply too extensive for someone of her limited experience. Aside from the gaping hole where her gut was supposed to be, there was a strange underlying strain on Kushina's very life force that was unlike anything Charlie had ever felt before. It was as if someone had literally torn a chunk of her spirit right out of her along with her stomach. It's no use, I can't do this, not unless." Unable to help herself, Charlie pulled one of her hands away and glanced down at it, regrettably observing as a soft etheric glow formed on the palm. The runes gleamed in the low light, almost as if they were taunting her with their presence, nagging at her. "I could use the soul contract on her to heal her, but she'll die if I don't, and her son." Glancing at the newborn Naruto and clenching her fist as she fought the tears that were starting to well up in her eyes, Charlie's heart seized in her chest. She could let the woman die free and ascend to heaven. A soul as pure as hers would not end up anywhere else, thus leaving a child without its mother, or she could save her life at the cost of casting an innocent soul to the depths of hell. She had to choose. Time was running out. I'm sorry, but this is the only way," she stated in her head, steeling herself for what she was about to do. "Ma'am, I can save your life. You can live a full life with your son, but it'll come at a cost." "Deal," Kushina gritted out before Charlie could finish, surprising the demoness with the abrupt answer. "But ma'am, I haven't even told you." "I don't care," the redhead cut her off again, shakily raising her head so her amethyst gaze could look straight into the blonde's ruby eyes. There was a defiant fire in them, one that refused to die out even as the light faded away by the second. "Whatever the cost, I accept anything to be there for him." Hearing this, a single guilty tear ran down Charlie's cheek as bit her lip and nodded in understanding. "Okay then," she choked out reluctantly before slowly grasping Kushina's hand as if to shake it, pressing the markings on her palm against the dying woman's. The moment she did, a new flaming pentagram bust into being beneath the two women while, unbeknownst to Charlie, an odd glimmer pulsed from her shoulders. "I, Charlie Morningstar, daughter of Lucifer the Fallen." The circle started to spin as she spoke, gradually gaining speed as the flames rose higher, the red and golden flames licking across both their bodies without leaving a mark. "Hereby grant you new life." Trails of red and gold magic flowed down from Charlie's arm onto Kushina's whilst the runes vanished from the demoness's palm and reappeared on the redhead's. Once the transfer was complete, a soft red glow enveloped the human's entire body as she slowly rose into the air above the burning demonic sigil. "In exchange for your eternal soul in servitude," Charlie finished, cementing the deal and pulling her hand away just as the fire of the pentagram erupted into the air and completely enveloped Kushina's form in a blinding light. "Please forgive me." The glow lit up the clearing, bathing the trees, herself, the deceased man, and the still crying baby in hellish light before slowly dying down to reveal the reborn Kushina Uzumaki. No longer human, she had transformed into something akin to a hellhound, albeit with a distinct vulpine nature instead of some kind of wolf or canine. Her entire body now had a thick fur coat and a long fluffy tail extended from her backside that slowly swayed back and forth. If Charlie had to give it a name, she'd call the form a hellfox, while mentally noting that Kushina's fur was the same deep red that her hair once was, and her eyes were white with uniquely amethyst sclera. She was also completely buck-ass naked, but Charlie could get her some new clothes once they got to hell. She wasn't the only one checking out the changes as Kushina looked at her new body with a mix of curiosity and surprise, testing the way her limbs moved while feeling her tail sway and her ears twitch. On instinct she sniffed the air before her snout crinkled when the scent of blood flooded her nostrils and she turned to look at the man who had died beside her. Her ears drooped as soon as her eyes laid on his body and she slowly reached out towards him, only to have her attention drawn away by a loud wail. Mother's instinct taking over, Kushina brushed past Charlie as she hurried over to her crying child, gently scooping him into her arms. "Shush, it's okay, Naruto," she soothed, cradling him against her fur-covered chest as she slowly rocked him back and forth. "It's okay now, mommy's got you." His crying devolved into sniffling as he looked up at her foxy muzzle with his bright blue eyes. She smiled gently at him and, with surprising dexterity for only having it 5 minutes, willed her tail to swing up and tickle his nose, making his face wrinkle up and give a cute sneeze before giggling happily at her. Kushina sniffled as her eyes started to water with joyful tears and she nuzzled her son's whiskered cheek lovingly, getting more giggles from the newborn. Turning to Charlie once she managed to regain a little of her composure, she offered the blonde a smile and softly whispered, "Thank you." Her joy turned to confusion though when her rescuer flinched as if she'd struck her and shied away from her with a downcast expression. "Please, don't thank me, not for this," Charlie muttered, refusing to meet the woman's gaze as she rubbed her arm in discomfort. While confused by her words at first, it didn't take long for the metaphoric lightbulb to light up in Kushina's mind when she recalled the chant during their deal. "Oh, I'm guessing there's more to our deal than just a fluffy makeover, huh?" Sure enough, the demoness slowly nodded her head without a word, getting the transformed redhead to sigh. "Can I at least give my husband a proper burial before we continue then?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly as she spoke when her gaze drifted back over to her deceased spouse on the ground. "Of course," Charlie muttered as she nodded again before moving to pick up the body for the woman, idly summoning forth a red shroud with golden trim to cover him with as she did so. XXXXX. Not long later, Minato Namikaze was laid into a grave that had been dug beside the masked shrine of the Uzumaki clan. No tombstone was made because Kushina didn't want anyone potentially digging up his body. Instead, 3 flowers that she had found had been planted over it, acting as his grave marker. Standing over it with tears freely flowing from her eyes, Kushina had her head bowed in respect as she silently wished her beloved peace in the afterlife. Once her prayers were done, the redhead rose up, wiping the tears from her eyes, and turned to Charlie who was standing a few feet away with a sleeping Naruto awkwardly cradled in her arms. "Thank you," she said while taking her child back, unable to help but smile softly when he instinctively tried to cling to the demoness in his sleep. Despite knowing she had damned this woman, Charlie couldn't stop the tiny smile that appeared on her own lips either as she watched the mother and child. "I'm just happy that I could help, I only wish that." "Hey," the Uzumaki cut her off, getting her attention. "Tonight was an absolute shit show of events. I honestly expected myself to die before I could hold my son one last time. You gave me not only that, but also a new life so that I can raise him. I don't care if you're from hell or whatever, I'm beyond grateful for what you've given me." "Even if this means you'll have to raise Naruto in hell?" Charlie asked, only to end up blinking in surprise when Kushina started laughing. "Please, if a sweetheart like you is the actual princess of the underworld then I think I'll be just fine," Kushina stated between giggles as she patted said princess on the shoulder. "I mean seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if you wore cute little unicorn panties or something with how sweet you are." "They're pony not unicorn, there's a difference," Charlie stated with a huff, before her whole face turned redder than her suit when she realized she said that out loud. "I mean, not that is, you know we should really get going. I need to report to my father." While tempted to call out the obvious change of subject, Kushina simply nodded and made sure Naruto was fast asleep in her arms. "I promise to uphold my end of the deal and serve you to the best of my ability, Charlie. All I want is to make sure Naruto can live a full happy life." She then gave the woman a small smirk and added, "Which is why I'm officially naming you as Naruto's godmother." "Wha? Me? Okay, maybe she wasn't done messing with her yet?" "Of course." Kushina grinned foxily while pulling the poor girl into a one-armed hug. "It's only fair that you have a more significant role in his life for what you've done." You made sure his mother got to live, after all. Her blush growing even deeper somehow at her newly given role, Charlie took a moment to look at the sleeping blonde in her new vassal's arms. Smiling gently, she reached out her hand and softly rubbed his head. Okay. I'll gladly accept that role, Kushina. Good, because you weren't allowed to do anything otherwise, milady. Truthfully, the teasing helped ease Charlie's still guilty heart. Sure, she may have turned a woman into a demon and forced her to raise her human child in hell, but there was at least a small silver lining. She had ensured that a mother and her son could be together, not cruelly separated by the hands of death. Kushina's happiness gave Charlie hope for the future. And as the trio departed for hell, the flowers over Minato's grave swayed under the winds of change. One bearing yellow petals, one with red petals, and one with orange petals, a symbol of the Uzumaki family's bond together in both life and death. End chapter. Kit. Well, that was fun. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter, although I will admit, this wasn't all my work. In fact, this story was mostly this guy's idea. Jabs thumb at Pain. Pain. Waves yo. Kit. Unfortunately, the genius here decided to promise not to post any new stories for a while, even though he can't stop coming up with great ones. He really wants to. Pain. Crosses arms with dirty look. It would have been fine if you hadn't messed it all up. Kit. Blinks. How did I mess it up? Pain. You got me hooked on HoloLive. Shows massive pile of Holomyth and HoloCouncil merchandise. Thanks to you I got kawaii ideas about them exploding from my head. Kit. So I showed you one Gura clip, Pain, and all those Shylily clips. Kit. And those, Pain. And you introduced me to Helluva Boss and Hasbin Hotel in the first place. Pulls out Stella body pillow to hug. Kit. I may have mentioned it once or twice, Pain. And how many ideas have you just happened to come up with that involve my two favorite waifus? Replaces Stella body pillow with giant Mumi and Sue plushies before eyes light up. Hey, wait a second. Kit. Sweating nervously. If you want Pain to continue this story personally, give a burb in the reviews, otherwise yours truly will be keeping it. Curious out, bolts for dear life. Pain. Why you sneaky, get back here, chases with a comically sized frying pan. Is paved in good intentions. Well, this is certainly a pleasant surprise. Lucifer's signature smirk never once wavered while he walked around a circle of his throne room. Slowly swirling his ring finger along the inside rim of a glass of red wine clasped in his other hand, he created a soft harmonic tone whilst stirring its contents at the same time. Off to the side, Charlie was standing with Naruto in her arms once again, rocking the newborn gently to lull him to sleep. The princess herself had worry written all over her face as she nervously chewed on the inside of her cheek. The reason for this would be because of the object of Lucifer's attention, Kushina, who was using every ounce of self-restraint she could muster to keep herself calm. Her instincts were practically screaming at her that he was more dangerous than he appeared and to keep as far away from him as possible. It was strange though, she didn't sense any hostility from him, and neither did his expression or actions give away anything aside from his apparent intrigue in her. And yet, there was just something about this demon that was setting her on edge. An underlying unease that his mere presence seemed to instill within her. The only saving grace she had was that Charlie had been able to get her a shirt and some pants to cover herself before this meeting. However, it was only a token of help as it still felt like she was standing naked under the King of Hell's piercing gaze. He definitely feels a lot more like a demon than Charlie does, that's for sure, she thought as she unconsciously tried to cover herself more as she kept her head bowed, not out of respect but because she really didn't feel like looking at that smile any more than she had to. I must admit that I'm impressed, Charlie. You've done far better than I ever expected. I honestly thought you'd come back here with some ratty little soul of a drug addict you found slummed in a gutter at the last minute. Coming to a stop at Kushina's side as he spoke, the King of Hell pulled his hand away from his drink and held it up to the transformed redhead's chin, gently pushing it up with a knuckle until their gazes finally met. That was the last straw for Kushina, and her lips snapped back into a snarl as a warning growl echoed from her snout. Although all that did was make Lucifer's grin widen a little. Never did I imagine you'd lay claim one this pure, let alone be gutsy enough even try going after an elemention. Rather than being pleased by the praise though, Charlie visibly recoiled before looking at the floor in shame. I did what I needed to do. That and more I'd say, considering the extra baggage you brought with you, Lucifer stated as his gaze dropped onto the baby in his daughter's grasp, making both her and Kushina tense up. Holding him closer to her chest protectively, Charlie tried to back up as her father closed the distance between them, only to end up bumping into the wall. Oh, relax sweetie, I'm not gonna hurt him. I just want a closer look at my would-be new grandchild. Really, just like you wanted to chat with me before? She shot back bitterly, getting him to pause for a moment before chuckling deeply with a shake of his head. Oh, you're gonna hold that one over my head for a long time, aren't you? the older blonde asked rhetorically as his daughter kept glaring at him distrustfully. Rolling his eyes, Lucifer held a hand up as it gained a familiar black and red glow. Fine then, I swear on my name that I intend neither harm nor malice towards the child. Happy? Happy was the absolute last thing Charlie was at the moment, but she eventually nodded her head regardless as she reluctantly allowed her father to get closer. Well, he's a cute little tyke for sure, he said with a chuckle, and hell, he could almost pass off as yours already, just need to add a little red to those cheeks. Whilst he spoke, Lucifer traced his fingers along the whisker-like markings on the slumbering infant's cheeks, leaving a thin smear of wine. The contact ended up rousing Naruto from his nap though, which the little guy was quick to show his dislike for as he started to squirm and whine. Whoops, my bad, the devil stated with a completely unapologetic smile as he downed the rest of his wine in a single gulp. He then twirled around on his ankle and started walking off whilst idly waving over his shoulder. Well, have fun with that. Wait, that's it? Charlie called out in confusion, briefly caught off guard by the man's abrupt exit. That's all you have to say? What about my plans? The hotel? Do whatever you want, it's not my problem anymore, was all Lucifer said, not even bothering to turn around as he went, before vanishing through a doorway. That man is a total ass, Kushina muttered after a few moments, her words snapping Charlie back to reality just in time to see her taking Naruto back. Wiping the wine off his face with her arm, the transformed redhead gently rocked the fussing infant until he fell back asleep. Once he was settled down, she turned her attention back to the older blonde with a concerned look. You okay, Charlie? Yeah, I'm fine. Just, why don't we get one of the guest rooms set up for you and Naruto? It was an obvious attempt to change the subject, but Charlie didn't care, nor did she wait for an answer as she started walking away too. Seeing that the girl was obviously not in the mood to talk about it, Kushina sighed and let the matter drop, for now at least, as she followed after the distraught demoness. Fortunately, getting settled in didn't take long, with the pair deciding on a guest room that was just down the hall from Charlie's room so that she'd be close by if they needed anything. Then, after some digging around in the attic, they were able to find her baby stuff for Naruto to use like her crib and old baby clothes. Naturally, it all needed more than a little dusting off after sitting in storage for nearly 2 centuries, which Charlie took care of alone since Kushina was still getting adjusted to her newly enhanced senses. And now, after almost 2 hours of non-stop dusting, Charlie waltzed into her room caked in dirt and grime. Groaning in exhaustion, she slowly made her way across the room toward her personal bathroom, dragging her feet with each step. I really need a bath, she grumbled to herself as she patted off the dust that was still stubbornly clinging to her body. The patches on her hands were being particularly annoying for some reason from the large clumps that just wouldn't let go. Come on, you stupid gunk, why won't you? Charlie suddenly trailed off mid-sentence as she came to a stop, her gaze locked on her palms as the dust finally crumbled away, to reveal the bloodstains underneath. Oh right, I never washed up, did I? Glancing down at her chest, Charlie finally noticed that all the spots of her suit were bloodstains as well, previously hidden by the natural red of her clothes until now. It had completely slipped her mind somehow that she had been holding a dying woman in her arms just a few hours ago. A dying woman whose soul she damned for eternity to save her life. An innocent woman who she damned. I damned her, Charlie whispered quietly, her hands starting to tremble as her breath grew labored and a look of horror slowly spread across her face. I damned someone. Oh God, I actually. The blonde covered her mouth and she fell to her knees, tears welling up in her eyes while her chest convulsed rapidly until blue bile spilled between Charlie's fingers as she desperately tried to keep it down to no avail, her hands dropping away on instinct when the acidic burn grew too strong and pretty much every meal that she'd ever eaten came flowing out of her all at once. Her vision blurring as she pitched forward, the princess only barely managed to hold herself up with her vomit-covered arms while she kept spewing all over the floor until there was nothing left in her stomach. But even then, it didn't actually stop. If anything, it got worse as the convulsions redoubled and caused the poor girl to painfully dry heave over and over and over. The hot rancid stench of vomit intermingled with the coppery smell of blood and flooded into her nostrils, making her eyes burn and stomach twist. Acrid smoke slowly rose into the air from the puke as it burned into everything it was in contact with, chewing through the floor with ease and blistering Charlie's skin. Hey Charlie, you in there? I'm coming in. So lost in her misery Charlie didn't even hear when someone started calling out her name nor when her door opened. Hello? Where you? Charlie. It wasn't until the demoness felt someone grabbing her by the shoulders that she was finally brought out of her stupor enough to see who it was. The newcomer was a young female sinner demon with dull gray skin and long white hair, a single ivory eye filled with concern whilst the other was covered by a darker gray patch with a pink X. Vaggie. The princess mumbled weakly before doubling over into a coughing fit, getting the now-named Vaggie to rub her back. What are you doing here? I was worried, you didn't show up for our date, and you weren't answering your phone. As she spoke, the gray lady helped her girlfriend up to her feet and all but carried her to a nearby chair. Once she set Charlie down, Vaggie knelt in front of the distraught blonde and cupped her face in both hands, gently wiping away the puke still sticking to the demoness's cheeks with her thumbs. But enough about me. What happened? Are you okay? Whose blood is this? I did something awful. Charlie spoke softly, barely even a whisper, in a raspy voice that kept cracking every other word. She was gonna die, and I was gonna lose everything if I didn't, but I can't. Shush, easy hun, easy, take your time, Vaggie said, pulling the choking up princess into a hug, letting her rest her head on her shoulder as she ran her fingers through her blonde locks. Why don't we go get washed up? A nice hot bubble bath to ease your nerves. Why yeah, that sounds nice. After everything she dealt with today, a bath sounded like a wonderful idea, so Charlie let the gray demoness lead her away to the bathroom. Meanwhile back with Kushina, the former human-turned-hellfox was humming softly while setting Naruto into his new crib. The little blonde was now dressed in a fluffy soft pink onesie that had Satan's little devil printed across the belly in red letters. As soon as he was put down, Naruto burbled in curiosity as he flailed his tiny arms around in the air in an adorable, yet naturally fruitless, attempt to explore the new place. Oh, looks like somebody likes his new home, don't you? Kushina asked, reaching down to gently tickle the infant's belly, making him squeal happily before latching onto her fingers. Smiling softly with a giggle, she was content with letting her child play with her hand until he tuckered himself out. However, with her attention focused on Naruto, the redhead was left unaware as someone slunk through the doorway. All that could be seen of the figure were glowing silver eyes as they slowly walked inside, their footfalls making nary a sound as they got closer and closer. Coming up directly behind the new mother, an arm rose, revealing delicate-looking manicured hand that reached for the Vulpine lady's shoulder. Glack. Faster than the blink of an eye, a huge golden chain burst from Kushina's back and smashed into the person's chest. A grunt tore from their lips as they were knocked across the room, slamming into the wall hard enough to fracture it. Not even a second later the chain struck again, piling onto the figure's chest to keep them pinned in place as Kushina whirled around to face them. What she was greeted with was a tall, lovely demoness with pale blonde hair and long magenta horns that were embedded in the wall. The moment she laid her eyes on her though, Kushina gasped as she immediately recognized the woman as Charlie's mother, Lilith if she recalled correctly. It wasn't exactly hard to tell who she was, considering the many pictures of her that were plastered all over the manor. Oh, shit. Sorry. The redhead exclaimed as she quickly retracting her chains, wincing when she noticed that Lilith's horns were buried into the veneered wood, leaving her literally mounted to the wall. OWWW. Talk about making an impression. The Queen of Hell groaned out, grunting in pain when she fell onto her ass courtesy of her horns shrinking until they popped free. I'm so sorry about that, ma'am. Are you okay? My reflexes sometimes act before I can. Kushina said with a sheepish smile, moving to help the blonde demoness back onto her feet only to be waved off. Don't worry about it, I should have known better than to sneak up on an elemention, Lilith stated with a giggle as she pushed herself back up, rubbing her ass and neck while she rolled her shoulders. Stretching her arms over her head, a sigh escaped her lips as her back popped satisfyingly before her horns grew back out, only now they were curled into a hook shape instead of straight back. Besides, that little love tap was nothing compared to when me and the hubby decide to be a bit rough in the bedroom. Oh, now that's something that'll leave me sore in the morning. If you say so. Wisely deciding not to touch that, Kushina let the matter drop as she waited for Lilith to regain her composure. Once she did, the Hellfox smiled politely as she offered the woman a hand. Anyway, my name's Kushina. You're probably wondering. My husband told me why you're here already. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Lilith. Rather than shaking Kushina's hand, Lilith grabbed it and turned it so that the palm faced upwards, exposing the runes still seared into the flesh. She muttered something under her breath that Kushina couldn't understand as she traced her finger over the demonic writing. Watching the centermost rune glow softly, the queen's brow furrowed for a moment before she sighed with a shake of her head. I'll be blessed. My little girl actually went and claimed a soul. Never thought I'd see the day, to be honest. Pulling her arm back, Kushina glanced at the contract before clenching it into a fist that she covered with her other hand. Well, from what I've heard, she didn't exactly have much choice in the matter. Ah yes, I figured there was something that Lulu left out, a few somethings in fact, Lilith said with a nod, gesturing to the baby crib as she spoke. May I? Oh, yeah, sure. Kushina said as she stepped aside since she didn't get the same feeling of unease around her like she did Lucifer. However, that didn't mean she wasn't going to keep a close eye on the blonde. She was nice, not stupid. Peering into the crib, a gentle smile appeared on Lilith's lips upon seeing Lil Naruto staring back up at her curiously. "Well, aren't you just the cutest thing I ever saw?" she asked while tickling the newborn's belly, making him squeal happily as she scooped him up. Holding him up to eye level, she cooed softly and gave him a little Eskimo kiss before cradling him in her arms. "So, is this little fella yours, or should I be wondering how my daughter managed to hide being pregnant for 9 months? He's mine." His name is Naruto. While a little irked at the question, Kushina couldn't blame Lilith for having to ask it, as Naruto did look far more like Charlie's child than her own given her new appearance. In fact, as loath as she was to agree with the jerk, Lucifer had a good point in how uncanny the resemblance was between the two. Charlie did agree to be his godmother though, if that matters. "Ah, so an honorary grandson. That means I still get to spoil you as much as I want." "Yes it does," Lilith said to Naruto, talking in a goofy baby voice as she gently set him back down and tucked him in again. Giving him one last boop on the nose once she was done, the Queen of Hell giggled at how his face scrunched up in adorable confusion. "There ya go little ow." It seemed that the little guy wasn't done with his new grandmother yet and latched onto a lock of hair. Lilith winced as she tried to pull her hair free, only for the little whiskered child's grip to stay firm as he tugged back with a giggle. Rather than being annoyed at this though, the demoness actually began laughing even with her head stuck at that awkward angle. "Are you sure he's not Charlie's? Because he's definitely got her grip." "Oh dear, hang on all," Kushina started to say as she moved to help, only to be cut off when Lilith waved her back. "Don't worry about it, I've dealt with this plenty of times before. Just watch the magic," she said calmly, getting the redhead to pause mid-step in confusion. Before Kushina could ask what Lilith meant, her attention was drawn back to the hair in Naruto's grasp when it was enveloped by a soft glow. Then, to the redhead's surprise, the entire lock started to move on its own, wiggling around like a snake before it detached from the blonde's head, allowing her to stand upright again. However, it didn't stop there, as evidenced by the disembodied lock continued to flop around in the crib, squirming all over the inside of the crib as it glowed even brighter. Then the whole clump broke apart, individual strands spreading away from each other, then entwining into threads which in turn started knitting themselves together. At the same time, several hairs changed, some expanding into large cotton balls whilst others turned into fluffy wool. Once they were all finished, Naruto found himself holding a brand new plush teddy bear that he looked at in awe, before sucking on one of its ears. Meanwhile, Lilith brushed her hair back with a smirk as the lost lock regrew almost instantly, leaving her appearance flawless once more. "And that's how it's done." "Handy trick. You wouldn't happen to be able to teach me how to do that too, would ya?" Kushina asked with a low whistle. "Perhaps another time," the horned blonde said while walking up to the transformed redhead and looking her over with a critical eye, rubbing her chin with a thoughtful hum. Whilst Kushina was at a loss for what Lilith was doing, the demoness's lips curved into a contemplative frown before nodding her head. "For now, though, perhaps we should go get you some more fitting attire. I doubt my daughter's clothes are very comfortable considering your differing physiques." Now that you mention it, the queen's assumption was spot on, as while the clothes did cover what needed to be covered, they weren't exactly a good fit. The pants in particular were quite tight around Kushina's waist and weren't meant for legs like hers. Not in a sense of fashion but quite literally, as the pants were designed for human-shaped legs and not the raised ankle structure of a fox like she currently had. That motherfucker, however, before she could say anything else, both ladies jumped in surprise when a loud shout filled to the brim with pure rage rang out. Seems like Vagatha stopped by for a visit," Lilith said once she recovered from her surprise, her brow rising as she glanced in the direction the shout had originated from. "I've never heard her that angry before though." Vagatha, where have I heard that? Oh, right, Charlie's girlfriend," Kushina thought while checking on Naruto, who was thankfully still busy nomming on his new toy. Charlie had mentioned her a few times while they were getting the baby stuff out of storage, mostly about how supportive and caring she was. Charlie probably told her what happened. "Ah yes, I almost forgot about that," Lilith muttered to herself before motioning for Kushina to continue. "You were saying something about her not having a choice? Your husband forced her to choose between making the deal or giving up her dreams forever," the human-turned-demon fox said with her arms crossed, getting the queen's brow to rise even higher. Apparently he was upset about her making him look bad by not having any souls of her own, so, a loud scoff made Kushina trail off and she looked to see Lilith rolling her eyes in exasperation. "What? I'm sorry, but that is a complete load of horseshit," the demoness stated dismissively, much to the foxwoman's disbelief, her lips curling up slightly into a snarl. "Excuse me? Oh, don't get me wrong, It's not what my husband did that I don't believe, but rather the reasoning for why he did it, Lilith explained as she made an iffy motion with her hand, waiting for Kushina to relax a little before she continued. The simple fact is that Lulu couldn't give a rat's ass about what anyone has to say about him even if he tried. Hell, he practically invented the concept of not giving a fuck. So, the idea that he was offended enough by a few measly rumors that he did any of that is laughably absurd. Yeah, I could see that, the transformed redhead agreed mentally while recalling how her own interaction with the ruler of hell went earlier. However, if Lilith was right, then that begged the question, why did he do it then? Personal profit or personal pleasure, the only two reasons he does anything on his own volition, said ruler's wife stated, holding up two fingers then ticking them off whilst she spoke. Either he got something out of this deal he felt was worth the effort, or he was bored again and thought this be a good way to entertain himself for a bit. I'd put my money on the latter personally is, and no offense intended, one measly soul is hardly considered a profit. You're saying he made Charlie do this just for a laugh? Kushina's lips curled back in disgust at the mere idea that someone could be so callously cruel to their own child. I can't say for sure, but I really wouldn't be surprised. It'd be far from the worst thing my husband has done to alleviate his boredom, Lilith admitted as she leaned against the wall with a mix of nostalgia and exasperation written on her face. Like the time he sunk the world's largest ship on its maiden voyage just because he thought it was funny how everyone kept saying it was unsinkable. Oh, and who could forget the time he went on vacation to London in the 1800s, there are still legends about that trip. I repeat, that man is a total ass, was all Kushina could say with a shake of her head, massaging the side of her brow with one hand whilst gently stroking Naruto's cheek with the other. She was really regretting not trusting her instincts and beating the hell out of the smiling demon while she had the chance. Or in this case, beat him out of hell. King of all evil, sweetie. Being an ass is kind of his thing, the horned demoness pointed out with a bemused smirk that quickly fell as she bitterly added. Although, he's definitely sleeping on the couch for this little stunt of his. He should get a swift stab in the nuts, if you ask me. A new voice added in suddenly, getting the women's head to snap towards the doorway to see a certain gray girl's head peeking into the room. Oh, hello Vagatha. It's good to see you again, Lilith greeted with a soft smile as she waved to the gray-haired sinner, who nodded back politely despite the annoyed frown she bore. Is Charlie with you? Yeah, she's right here, Vaggie stated before she stepped in the room fully with Charlie in tow, revealing their bathrobe-clad forms. However, the latter also had bandages wrapped around her hands and taped onto her lower jaw, much to Kushina and Lilith's concern. Concern that only grew when they also noticed how bloodshot her eyes were and the way she was blatantly leaning on Vaggie for support as her legs trembled underneath her. Pushing off the wall, Lilith was over by her daughter's side in a second and gently cupped her chin. Oh dear, what happened, sweetie? It's nothing, just had a bit of an upset stomach, I'm better now. The younger blonde tried to play it off as her mother gingerly peeled back some of the bandages on her face to expose the blistered skin underneath. She would have smiled to help reassure the worried demoness, but unfortunately, the disinfectant, numbing cream Vaggie had applied made her lips refuse to stay up. Nothing my ass, you? Vaggie tried to say something but was cut off when Charlie quickly slapped a hand over her mouth with a wince. Giving her girlfriend a dull look, the one-eyed demon crossed her arms disapprovingly as she mumbled something unintelligible through the bandage-covered limb. Charlie could only offer an apologetic shrug in return before turning her attention back to her mother, who was still looking her over in concern. Anyway, I see you've met our new, guests. Indeed, and I must say they're quite the intriguing pair of visitors, Lilith said with a giggle, carefully taping the bandages back into place as she spoke. Once she was done, the horned demoness rested her hand atop the princess's head and gently stroked her scalp. In fact, I was just about to take Kushina here out to some shopping for a desperately needed new wardrobe. Would you like to tag along? This time it was Charlie's turn to be cut off as Vaggie pinched her lips shut while pulling away the hand muffling herself. Thanks, but no thanks, Mrs. Morningstar. Charlie should stay put and get some rest, the sinner stated whilst giving her girlfriend a stern look that left no room for arguments. Besides, we can watch over the little Niño for you. Not exactly a good idea to bring him if you're clothes shopping after all. Ah, of course, of course. You bring up a fair point, the horned blonde said with a nod before clapping her hands together and stepping aside. Well, in that case, why don't you all get introduced? I've got a few things to take care of before we go, anyway. Good idea, nodding in agreement. Kushina offered a polite smile as she held out a hand towards Vaggie. The name's Kushina Uzumaki. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Vagatha, but my friends call me Vaggie, the gray girl stated, accepting the shake with a tiny, albeit brief, smile on her lips. She then motioned her head towards the baby in the crib as he burbled curiously. And I'm guessing the Niño over there is Naruto? You'd be correct. Come on and say, hi, as Kushina led Vaggie, and in turn Charlie, over to the crib so they could gush over Naruto. Lilith silently made her way out of the room and down the hall. Once she was certain she was out of earshot, the Queen of Hell reached into a hidden pocket of her dress and pulled out a hellphone. Turning it on, she quickly dialed in a number before holding the device up to her ear. Hello? Yes, I'd like to make an order. No, not the usual stuff. I need something more dangerous. Several days later Lilith smirked as she stalked through the dark streets of Pentagram City. Her steps graceful yet silent as she passed by various demons who immediately moved out of her way either out of fear or respect. Taking a turn onto a grungier street that looked more like an alleyway, aside from the size, she headed straight for an equally dilapidated-looking building that sat near the end and walked inside. There wasn't much to see on the interior, aside from a scarred female imp sitting behind a counter and typing away at a computer. Ehem. Oh, Lady Lilith. Or at least she was until Lilith cleared her throat to get her attention, causing the imp to practically teleport from her seat to stand before the demonic royal with a bow. How may I be of assistance today? I'm here to pick up something I ordered, Lilith stated, getting the imp to nod in understanding before rushing back to her seat and type rapidly on her computer. Ah yes, I see it now. It's right in the back, she said with a nervous smile, grabbing a paper that her computer printed out as she led the Queen of Hell to another room, one filled with dozens of different types of parcels and packages. Walking past them all, the duo soon arrived at a series of heavy-duty cages of varying sizes, each one holding some kind of demonic beast ranging from a giant scorpion that was pointlessly stinging the bars to a ferocious fiery horse gnawing on a carcass. They eventually stopped in front of a smaller cage, roughly the size of a kennel, that was bathed in darkness, thus hiding its contents from sight. Are you sure you want this, ma'am? The scared imp asked nervously, pointedly keeping a good distance between herself and the bars as she gulped nervously. Not that it's any of my business of course, but this one has proven quite cooperative, to say the least. Is that so? With no fear of her own, Lilith approached the cage, peering inside the darkness within with an intrigued look before reaching her hand past the bars, only to immediately yank it back when a pair of jaws filled with razor-sharp teeth tried to chomp down on the limb. Oh ho, feisty little one, aren't you? The only response she got was a low menacing growl as whatever it was slunk back into the back of its cage. That seemed to be enough for her though as Lilith smirked while pulling out her wallet. I'll take it. End chapter. Omake. Whirlpool Combat, Kushina vs. Lilith. Lilith swirled a glass of champagne in one hand while she casually strutted ahead, her horns growing out into a perfect half-spiral. Well, this is certainly a surprise. Cracking her knuckles and neck at the same time, Kushina snarled defensively with several golden chains emerging from her back. And who the hell are you? I do believe I should be the one asking you that, sweetheart, Lilith said before downing the rest of her drink and tossing the empty glass aside as magic energy swirled around her body. Have a hell of a Christmas. It was dark, very dark, nothing to be seen in the encompassing darkness aside from a few weak rays of light that gleamed in through small holes. I'm still surprised that demons celebrate Christmas too. From what I've been told, it's not exactly a fitting theme for hell. Being unable to see, all that was left were the sounds, mostly ladies talking along with some nonsensical babbling and occasionally tearing paper. Well, it's not exactly the same as what humans or elementians celebrate, one of the ladies said, sounding an odd mix of upbeat and sheepish. Sure, there's still gift giving and such, but otherwise all it's really about down here is, well, it's an excuse to get completely cara de mierda and be an even bigger jackass than usual, a calmer voice stated in a dry tone. That and you get more gifts the naughtier you are instead of nice, since it's that purr Krampus that delivers them. Vaggie, don't give me that look, Charlie, we both know it's true. Yeah, but you don't have to be so pessimistic about it. It's not pessimism, hun, it's realism. Now stop pouting and open your present. Ooh. Present. More sounds of ripping paper, much more energetic this time, before a loud happy gasp rang out. I love it, Vag. It's so cute. I gotta try it on. Not yet, sweetie. That voice was mature, calm, and very familiar, voice of the one who fed and sheltered. And as she spoke, more light flooded in through the small gaps for a moment before going dim as everything shook. Unless you want to miss your godson opening his first Christmas present ever, that is. Of course not. More shaking as the voices got louder. Oh, wow, that's a big box. What did you get him, Mom? What? A melodious laughter filled the air as everything shook yet again and the light returned. Settle down, you'll get to find out soon enough. Kushina, do you have the ready and filming? The last voice said confidently before cooing softly. There's my baby boy, waved to the camera Naru. Soft happy burbling was heard for a moment along with a loud smacking and more shaking as Kushina and Charlie giggled in amusement. So, is anyone gonna help him or are we gonna wait till he somehow figures out how to open that by himself? Vaggie asked sarcastically, although her voice was much more amused sounding than it was before. Oh, I've got it. Lilith's voice stated before several taps rang out, one slow, three fast and one slow again. That was signal. What are you? There was a rush and light flared, blindingly bright everywhere before clearing to reveal a large spacious room filled with vibrant decorations. A bright red tree sat in the middle of the room. A light in flaming lights and decorations, yet not a single leaf was burned whilst presents were heaped up beneath it. Magic streamers made of an assortment of colors of light stretched across the ceiling to create a lovely aurora of colors. Then there were the room's occupants, a red fox lady with a camera, a blonde pale demon in a Santa costume with a baby human wearing a Santa hat sitting on her lap, a moth-like girl dressed like an elf, and another blonde lady sipping eggnog. All of them except the last had their jaws hanging in shock and eyes wide. Why? Because of the young hellhound pup that had just popped out of the large Christmas present sitting in front of Lil Naruto. Looking no older than 4 or 5, she had thick black and white fur along with messy white hair done up in a ponytail, silverish eyes amidst blood-red sclera, and a big fluffy black tail. Her clothes were equally dark-colored, a plain gray shirt and black shorts, whilst one of her ears had a shiny red Christmas bow loosely tied onto it. It also looked like she was supposed to be wearing a Santa hat as well but decided it made a better snack instead as she chewed on the holiday-themed clothing, her teeth easily tearing through the red fabric. Pulling out the remnants for a moment, she gave everyone in the room a dull look for a few moments before simply saying, "Bark, bark." With her piece said, the hellhound sank back into her box until only her head was peeking out as she went back to eating her hat. "Aw come on Luna, you can give it more enthusiasm than that." Lilith, the only one not frozen in shock, said with a playful sigh as she got up from her seat and patted the hellhound's shoulder. However, the now named Luna just huffed indignantly and looked away, her cheeks puffing out adorably as she stuffed more hat into her mouth. "No wanna, look silly," she mumbled between bites, making Lilith shake her head with another sigh. "Alright. Well, why don't you at least say hello to your new owner?" the Queen of Hell suggested as she gently nudged the young hellhound's chin so that she was looking at Charlie and Naruto. This may have been the wrong thing to say to as Luna's lips curled back into a snarl the moment that she heard the word owner. However, that displeasure almost immediately turned to surprise once she noticed that Lilith was pointing at Naruto, not Charlie. "My owner a baby? Yes, yes he is," the horned blonde said with a nod, smirking softly when she saw the confused curiosity already forming in the demonic canine's eyes. Before the wolf girl knew what she was doing, she had climbed out of her box and dropped to the floor in front of Naruto and Charlie. Slowly padding closer to the duo, Luna gave the older blonde a distrustful look until she held her hands up in peace without a word before focusing back on the infant on her lap. She tilted her head to the side cutely while sinking into a crouch with her hands resting against the ground, unknowingly making her look just like a sitting dog, and leaning her head until her face was barely an inch away from Naruto's. The baby looked right back with wide eyes as she started sniffing him, giggling when her nose lightly poked against his whiskered cheek. Grabbing at her snout, he smiled brightly as his fingers sank into her soft fur before imitating her sniffing as if he were smelling her too. "Ah, would you look at that? They're getting along already," Lilith said with a giggle as she sat back down beside Kushina, who still looked completely flabbergasted much to the demoness's amusement. Raising one of her hands up to the foxy lady's jaw, she gave it a gentle flick that caused it to shut whilst also snapping her out of her daze. "Huh? What?" she muttered, blinking a few times as her brain caught back up to the present and turned to her fellow mother with an unsure expression. Not to sound unappreciative Lilith san, but is this really an appropriate gift for a baby?" "Oh, relax my dear, I know this may seem odd since you're still getting used to how things work down here but help-ups make wonderful companions for children. As long as they're properly handled and trained at least," Lilith stated confidently, aside from the last bit which she muttered extremely fast, making Kushina deadpan at her. "It'll be fine, trust me. I personally made sure that Luna here is acclimated to her new home, helped her tone down her more violent tendencies, and taught her how to speak a bit better." As she spoke, the blonde demoness gestured to the pair in question, who were still sniffing each other, only now Luna had started to walk circles around Naruto and Charlie. While her face didn't show any emotion aside from curiosity and no small amount of caution, her tail betrayed her hidden excitement as it slowly wagged back and forth behind her. "Wait, what was that part about violent tendencies?" "Well, hellhounds are natural fighters and excellent protectors, which is part of why I got one for my adorable grandson. Figured it'd be best that he had a little extra protection since he's not exactly native to hell," Lilith explained, getting Kushina to nod in understanding. "So, when I sent an order for one, I made sure to specify that I wanted the toughest, fiercest, roughest pup they could find. And boy, I can tell you they did not disappoint. I can't count how many times I almost lost fingers before I got her to trust me. Oh yeah, that totally makes it sound like a wonderful idea to have her around a defenseless infant. Vaggie chipped in sarcastically with an eye roll as she shook her head in disbelief, although those who looked closer could see that her eye was now focused on the help-up in question. As if sensing her stare, Luna stopped her investigation of Naruto to look at Vaggie, her fur standing on end as she bared her teeth defensively. However, her attention was soon brought back to the baby when he crawled off Charlie's lap and bumped against the pup's side. The baffled look on her face was quite adorable as he buried his face in her fur with a loud sniffing sound. Your concerns are understandable but unwarranted, Vagatha. Luna is actually quite sweet once you get to know her, Lilith said with a smile, watching Luna nudge Naruto away and getting down on all fours so she was face to face with him again. Her tail was wagging even faster than ever as she tilted her head side to side, which the blonde tot mimicked almost perfectly. I mean, just look at her, does that look dangerous to you? Whatever. The sinner demoness muttered, still not letting the hound out of her sight as she sipped at a large frothy beverage. Aw, ease up, Vag, I'm sure Mom knows what she's doing, Charlie told her girlfriend reassuringly, then clearing her throat to get the wolf girl's attention while holding out a hand with a friendly smile. It's nice to meet you, Luna, I'm Charlie. Whatever, bitch, was all the help-up said before going back to playing with Naruto, or whatever it was she was doing with him exactly, completely ignoring the offered hand. This made the demon princess pout while her mother scratched her cheek with a sheepish smile when both Vaggie and Kushina deadpanned at her. Okay, so we're still working on her cursing habit. Without a word, Kushina tossed her camera to Vaggie as she got up to her feet and walked up to the pair, getting the young hound's attention. Seeing her coming straight at her, Luna was on the defensive again almost instantly, taking a few steps back with a soft warning growl. Yet this didn't even deter Kushina in the slightest, and the foxy lady kept approaching, eventually sinking into a crouch right in front of the snarling pup as their gazes locked. Then the redhead slowly reached out and, after waiting a second when Luna flinched away, gently cupped the help-up's chin in the palm of her hand. And what do you have to say about all of this, little one? Now that got Luna to stop snarling right away, her eyes widening in surprise as her hackles lowered. You ask me? Yes. This affects you more than anyone, so you should have a say in what happens, Kushina said, smiling softly as she stroked the wolf girl's cheek with her thumb. So, tell me, are you okay with this? With staying with us? Luna trailed off as her gaze drifted to Lilith for a moment, only for Kushina to gently turn her head so she was looking back at her again. Don't look at her, I'm not asking her, the transformed redhead stated, making sure to keep the help-up's attention on her. I'm asking you, are you alright with this? Staring into her violet eyes, Luna was still a bit hesitant but eventually slowly nodded her head. It okay, gooder than before, I like it here. Then welcome to the family, Luna, Kushina said with a soft smile before surprising the girl yet again by scooping her up in her arms for a hug. Eyes wide, Luna didn't know what to do as she dangled in the redhead's grasp. Normally when someone tried to grab her like this she'd start clawing, biting, and if necessary, violently disemboweling the poor bastard or bastards responsible. It was just trained instinct. A survival mechanism for dealing with the unending danger and despair that was Hell's foster care system. Not even Lilith had been able to totally curb her innate reflex of bite first, ask questions never. Yet here she was, buried in the warm fluffy embrace of this lady she just met, and she felt safe, happy. She didn't know what it was, but she liked it. So, she stayed silent and kept enjoying it, even as Kushina carried her back over to the tree with Naruto and Charlie, the former having moved on to sniffing the latter instead, much to everyone's amusement. Alright. Who's opening the next one? The fox lady asked once she took a seat next besides the blondes, setting Luna down on her lap. Oh, that's you, Charlie exclaimed excitedly, grabbing a small box near the top of the heap, and handing it to Kushina. This one is from me. I hope you like it. Knowing you, I'm sure I will, Charlie, the transformed redhead said with a giggle before turning to full-blown laughter when she ripped the wrapping off to reveal an ornate picture frame in the shape of a heart. It was what was in the frame itself that made her laugh though, a photo of herself, Naruto, Charlie, and Vaggie. All four of them dressed in cheesy onesie animal pajamas, a cat, fox, husky, and wolf respectively. The first three looked like they were having the time of their life whilst the latter looked blandly resigned to her fate. Oh man, I can't believe it, I thought Vaggie deleted all the pictures from that night. Wait, what? Said Sinner asked with a raised brow, leaning up from her seat to get a peek, before groaning as her cheeks turned red when she saw the picture. Satan damn it, Charlie, you told me you deleted that. I did, after it was already backed up on my Smog account, the blonde princess admitted sheepishly, making her girlfriend palm her face, before pulling out her hell phone and sidling up to Kushina. Speaking of pics, say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Bitchmas. Flash a picture is seen of Kushina, Charlie, and Naruto smiling while a grumpy Luna pushed Charlie's chest out of her face. Flash Naruto was smiling happily as he and Luna ripped the wrapping off a large box for a baby playseat. Flash Kushina held Luna by the waist as Lilith tried, and failed, to pull the wrapping the little hellhound had been trying to eat out of her mouth. Flash Vaggie had an unamused look on her face as she held up a set of very sexy Christmas-themed lingerie. Meanwhile Kushina was doubled over laughing and a red-faced Charlie was covering Naruto and Luna's eyes. Flash and amused Lilith rolled her eyes while she held up a classic, Hell's Greatest Grandmother, coffee cup with a bow on top in one hand and Naruto in her free arm. The baby was staring straight at the mug curiously, one of his little hands trying to grasp for it despite it being far out of his reach. Flash Vaggie had an exasperated smile on her lips as Charlie lifted her off her feet in a hug, the pair of them dressed in new festive sweaters. Off to the side, Lilith was struggling to fit a squirming Luna into her own sweater while an already sweater-clad Naruto stared at the camera with his head tilted in confusion. Flash Kushina had both Luna and Naruto on her lap, the former still grumpy as she chewed on the sleeve of her sweater and the latter waving around a brand new imp-themed baby rattle. Flash everyone was gathered around a large table that was loaded to the brim with various different foods and drinks. Lilith was guiding some imp servants on where to put a massive turkey while Luna was staring at said turkey with drool pouring from her lips. Meanwhile, Charlie was setting Naruto into a high chair while Kushina was prepping a bottle of breast milk for him. And lastly Vaggie was right in front of the camera fiddling with something that couldn't be seen. Flash everyone was turned to see Luna jumping onto the turkey, her jaw already buried into the tender flesh. Flash Kushina was once more laughing on the floor as Lilith and Charlie pulled Luna off the half-eaten turkey. The little help-up's face was covered in stuffing and half-chewed meat as she hugged her comically bloated stomach. Flash all of them were now gathered in front of a fireplace, drinking hot cocoa or eggnog from large festive-themed cups. Flash Luna had a light blush on her face that she tried to hide with her mug as a drowsy Naruto clung to her tail. Flash Vaggie had a confused look on her face as Charlie grabbed her arm for some reason. Flash her look turned to amusement when she and Charlie looked up to see a bushel of mistletoe hanging above them. Flash the two were leaned in real close, their lips puckered and eyes closed. Flash both of them had surprised looks on their faces as they opened their eyes to find they were kissing Naruto's cheeks instead of each other. The reason for this being Lilith, who was holding the baby up between them with her lips curled into a mischievous smile. Later Kushina had a smile on her lips as she tucked Naruto into bed, gently rubbing the top of his head as she made sure everything was nice and secure. "Good night my little maelstrom," she whispered once she was done, giving the slumbering infant one last kiss on the forehead before turning to leave. However, instead of heading for the door though, the foxified redhead headed for the far corner of the room where Luna was sitting. The wolf girl had just finished pulling off her sweater, or at least what was left of it, and tossed to the side before flopping onto a large plush dog bed. Kushina couldn't help but frown a little at that since, while it was possibly the most luxurious-looking dog bed she'd ever seen, it was still a dog bed. She understood that by all means Luna was her son's pet and personal bodyguard, hence why she agreed that she could share a room with him, but it just didn't sit right with her to just act like the poor girl was an actual dog. Thankfully, Lilith had agreed to get her a real bed to sleep on soon, but it'd take a couple of days at the least. Putting these thoughts aside for the time being, Kushina knelt beside Luna and offered a supportive smile. "How ya doing, sweetie? All settled and okay?" "Yes ma'am." She mumbled with a sleepy nod, drawing out the yes, as she yawned deeply and rubbed one of her eyes. "That's good." Grabbing the blanket, Kushina laid it over Luna as the tired little hellhound buried her face into a pillow. After making sure that she was tucked in nice and comfy too, the human-turned hellfox gently combed her fingers through the pup's hair to get some turkey bits still stuck in the locks. "But if you need anything don't be afraid to ask me, okay? I'll be just in the other room." "Yef moff," was the muffled reply she got as Luna nodded her head against the pillow. "All right. Sleep tight Luna," Kushina said, ruffling the girl's hair again as she was getting back up and started heading for her own bed in the conjoined room. Stopping at the doorway, she looked back one more time to make sure everything was all right before turning off the lights and closing the door. One of Luna's eyes cracked open tiredly when she felt a weight shifting on her bed. Assuming it was Kushina again at first, the help-up grumbled to herself as she lifted her head to tell the nice lady she was fine for the umpteenth time. However, as her vision came back into focus, she was surprised to not see the red-headed fox at all, or anyone else for that matter. Blinking in confusion, her head swiveled back and forth across the darkened room, the only light being the soft red glow of the moon shining through the windows, to find that there was not a soul to be found. But then Luna felt the weight move again along with something pressing against her side, causing her to look down this time and see, owner. Indeed, little Naru was laid out on the dog bed right beside her somehow, hugging onto her waist as he nuzzled against her side. How is he? He was in, huh? One could practically see the question marks floating around the help-up's head as her gaze went from the infant snuggling her to his crib all the way on the other side of the room and back again. She couldn't see anyone else, nor did she smell any new scents, so as far as she could tell nobody else had come in the room since the nice lady left. However, that was impossible. There had to have been someone. It's not like the baby crawled out of his crib, across the floor, and into her bed all by himself. Right? Fuck it. Luna grumbled to herself as she laid back down, wrapping Naruto up in a hug as she went back to sleep. She was too tired to care how it happened. She could worry about it in the morning. Had she stayed awake just a few seconds longer though, she might have seen the hellphone peek in through the doorway to snap a picture with a soft click. Making a splash last time. How is he? He was in, huh? One could practically see the question marks floating around the help-up's head as her gaze went from the infant snuggling her to his crib all the way on the other side of the room and back again. She couldn't see anyone else, nor did she smell any new scents, so as far as she could tell nobody else had come in the room since the nice lady left. However, that was impossible. There had to have been someone. It's not like the baby crawled out of his crib, across the floor, and into her bed all by himself. Right? Fuck it. Luna grumbled to herself as she laid back down, wrapping Naruto up in a hug as she went back to sleep. She was too tired to care how it happened. She could worry about it in the morning. Had she stayed awake just a few seconds longer though, she might have seen the hellphone peek in through the doorway to snap a picture with a soft click. And now, 4 years later, many things had changed within Naruto and Luna's bedroom over the years. For starters, in place of a baby crib and dog bed for the duo, there were 2 stylishly carved beds. One queen-sized and the other large twin. The once bare wooden floor was covered in thick black carpeting and a large TV sat opposite of the beds with a bunch of game consoles, controllers, and other such stuff messily piled up around it. The walls were covered with posters of different movies, games, etc., while various toys and dirty clothes littered the floor, and a desk sat in the corner with a computer and a few half-chewed-up bones. Click hello all you dumbass fucks. This is Katie Killjoy of 666 News for the early morning report, that is assuming anyone is even awake at this god-forsaken hour. And of course, there was an alarm clock, situated on a little nightstand sitting perfectly between the 2 beds. For the weather today we're expecting it to be hot as all. A loud crunch filled the air as a furred hand slammed down onto the poor timekeeping machine, smashing it to pieces in one fell strike. Said hand then slowly retracted into a big pile of blankets that was piled up atop the smaller bed with a grumble. Hate that bitch. The heap shifted around a bit before it was shoved aside as a half-awake and very grumpy-looking Luna sat up. Like the room itself, the hellhound had changed over the years, having grown nearly twice her original height and her hair reached all the way down to her lower back. Yawning, Luna shoved aside the rest of the blankets to reveal her plain baggy gray and black pajamas while she grumbled something foul under her breath. Her feet sank into the lush carpeting as she dragged herself out of bed, grunting when her spine realigned with a satisfying crack, before shuffling across the room over to the bathroom. Stupid mornings, the demonic canine mumbled as she idly flicked on the lights when she passed through the doorway, her face scrunching up from the sudden glare searing into her pupils. Much like the rest of the mansion, their personal bathroom was quite spacious and luxurious, tiled in blood red and porcelain white tile. On one side was what could modestly be called a pool rather than a bathtub made of black marble and a walk-in shower surrounded by frosted glass, while a vanity sink elegantly carved from pure mammon mahogany with a large round mirror took up the other. Upon reaching said sink, Luna stared at her reflection in the mirror dully before grabbing a large brush and slowly dragging it through her messy mane of gray hair. At the same time, she opened her jaws wide and bared her teeth for some reason, revealing dozens of razor-sharp teeth, the most notable being her canines, which were crowned in pale gold that glowed softly. Her reason for doing this was soon revealed when 2 tiny golden chains extended from behind her and wrapped around a pair of toothbrushes sitting in a cup by the sink. Lifting them up, a third chain squeezed some toothpaste onto each brush before they were raised up to mouth level. However, only one actually went into Luna's mouth, vigorously scrubbing the pointed teeth while she brushed her hair. The other brush instead went over to the hellhound's shoulder, where the sleepy face of one Naruto Uzumaki peeked out with a yawn, revealed to be riding on his pet's back the whole time. The whiskered blonde had grown from the wee babe he'd once been, now just a few inches shy of 3 feet tall and dressed in pajamas just like Luna's. His eyes were bleary as he rested his chin on his ride's collarbone and his arms, once hidden amidst the folds of her shirt, coiled around the demon dog's neck. The chains turned out to be coming from him, extending from the blonde's shoulder blades to the brushes, working seemingly by themselves while he dozed. Too early, he mumbled out tiredly, nuzzling against Luna's neck while said hellhound, with her tail wagging faintly, grumbled in agreement as she kept brushing her hair, then her fur, and finally Naruto's hair. Nothing else was said between the two as they silently went about their morning rituals, from finishing up brushing to Naruto helping Luna file her nails. Eventually the whiskered blonde climbed off the hellhound's back so they could both undress as they headed over to the bubble-filled tub, courtesy of Naruto's chains once more. Geronimo! Naruto exclaimed as he eagerly dived into the soapy water, sending it splashing everywhere. Hey! Watch it! Including onto a less than amused Luna, who glowered at the energetic child as she wiped suds off her snout. Said boy giggled sheepishly while scratching the back of his head with an apologetic smile. Sorry, sis. Yeah, you say that every cannonball. The hellhound suddenly cut herself off as she jumped several feet straight up and came crashing down in the water. The resulting splash was so large that its wake carried her laughing adoptive brother clear to the other side of the tub and drenched nearly the entire bathroom at the same time. Popping back up to the surface, Luna shook the water out of her eyes before snickering at the sight of the mess she had caused. Naruto laughed some more as he looked at the suds covering the floor. You take the messiest baths, sis. Normal baths are for losers, Luna declared in an almost smug tone before sputtering when her little bro splashed her face. Oh, it is on, little man. Elsewhere in a personal office on the other side of the mansion, Kushina could be found seated behind a large grandiose desk, sorting through stacks of paperwork that littered its surface. The kunoichi turned hellfox hadn't changed much over the years aside from her choice in clothes, having switched her dress and apron to a black business tux. She was in the middle of flipping through some documents in a manila folder that was stamped with the image of 3 heads clustered together in flame when her gaze drifted to a small monitor built into her desk. Said monitor showed a live feed of her children, and she was just in time to see Luna playfully throwing handfuls of bubbles at Naruto while the blonde fired back using the shower head hose. Laughter and splashes echoed out as Kushina couldn't help her own giggles at the sight of her 2 little ones bonding. She had to remember to thank Lilith again for buying Luna and allowing her to adopt the girl into her and her son's life. Not only had Naruto gotten a loyal, if at times rather violent, protector out of it, but also a loving sister. It still amused the hellfox how Luna would act so tsunere when she and the others were around, but then be more open to Naruto's affections as the little brother when she thought nobody was around. Charlie, bless her, had taken to placing some hidden cameras around the mansion for whenever Naruto and Luna would be left by themselves. An understandable safety precaution considering they lived in literal hell, not to mention the princess had lost any and all trust in her father after the fateful day her and Kushina met. The fact it meant Kushina could record all the adorable antics of her godson and his fluffy older sister for future teasing was just an added bonus for Hell's princess. Oh, they grow up so fast, she mumbled to herself, giggling again while she watched Luna disappear under the water before popping back up behind Naruto and tickling his armpits, making the boy squeal in laughter. The demonic Vulpine quickly hit the mute button though when she heard a creak, sitting up straighter and straightening up the papers on her desk. By the time the door swung open and Vaggie walked in with a food-laden tray in hand, Kushina was once more nose-deep in documents. Spying on the Chiquitos again, are we? Sadly, her attempt at business casual was for naught as the moth-like sinner demon saw straight through her little charade. A snort escaped Vaggie's lips at the sheepish look on the busted redhead's face. How do you always know? Kushina asked back with a pout, before perking right back up when Vaggie set the tray down, revealing a large stack of pancakes. She didn't even have to ask to know it was made by her quote, master, unquote, considering they were all shaped like cute little bears with an egg and bacon smile on top. Because you're just that predictable, astuta, Vaggie stated amusedly, making the fluffy redhead grumble under her breath as she started munching on her breakfast. Taking a seat across from Kushina, the X-eyed demoness picked up some of the completed documents and curiously thumbed through them. Business looks like it's going good. About as good as it usually is, seeing as profits are up nearly 7% since last quarter, the hellfox replied. You heard correctly, Kushina had gotten into the corporate game over the last few years by starting up her own business. Part of it was so she could have her own financial independence, not wanting to have to just mooch off Charlie for her entire time in hell. She had to think of both her and her children's future after all. And the other part was to help said demoness with her dream by bringing in much needed funding for running her future Reformation Hotel. Turned out that, despite being the daughter of Hell's King, the princess wasn't exactly as loaded as one would have expected. Now, that wasn't to say she didn't have any cash to throw around as she did get a hefty sum each month from her parents as an allowance. But it was simply nowhere near enough to cover all the various expenses that her plan would require. Especially since a good chunk of it was already being spent spoiling a certain godson of hers. Setting the documents back down, Vaggie grabbed a magazine that was sitting on the desk and looking at a cover which had a picture of Kushina and Lilith. The pair were clinking wine glasses while standing behind a table covered by various bottles of alcohol, all bearing a red swirl symbol. The text, Whirlpool County brand liquor and booze, quality good enough for royalty at a cost you can afford, was emblazoned across the page in brilliant gold lettering. Not even in business 3 years and yet you're already dominating the market, the moth-like sinner muttered with an amused sigh as she flipped the pages, finding that almost each one was covered in various ads from Kushina's business. Everything from beauty products to home repair, all under the same company name and logo. How in hell did you pull this off? Oh, you want me to tell you? I thought you wanted to figure that out for yourself, Kushina pointed out cheekily, making Vaggie roll her eyes with another sigh. The gray-haired demoness had been trying to figure out the Hellfox's secret to success for months and had been determined to find the answer on her own. The biggest conundrum was the fact everything Kushina sold was of immensely higher quality than basically anything else being sold. Not really a high bar considering the majority of Hell's products could be accurately summarized as cheap greasy knockoffs. At the same time though, it was also way more affordable, usually being half or even a third the price as all the regular crap being sold. It just didn't make sense how she could make things so good and sell them dirt cheap while still turning a profit. And yet somehow, all the foxy woman was doing was profiting, with the money rolling in almost non-stop ever since her first product, home-brewed sake, hit the shelves. Had it been anyone else, Vaggie would be convinced that there was some kind of scam going on, but she knew Kushina well enough to know that the woman would never be involved in such things. And I admit defeat, so just tell me already, the ex-eyed sinner muttered, even holding her hands up in mock surrender for added emphasis. Well, there's the obvious fact I don't actually have to pay most of my staff seeing as they're all me, Kushina said between bites while passing a stack of papers off to a clone of herself that appeared in a puff of smoke. The duplicate was then enveloped by another puff which soon dispersed to show the clone now looked like a succubus version of Kushina dressed in a green work uniform that had Whirlpool Co.'s emblem across the back before it vanished in a static blur. As you already know, most of the work is handled by my shadow clones overseen by blood clones. Yeah, after you tweaked the spells I mean jutsu so that they only send back memories if they want to or are dispelled forcibly. But that seriously can't be the only part of it. Cutting out the wages would certainly save more than a few souls, but that was still a rather small part of the overall costs Vaggie could think of. Naturally, although it does play a bigger role in it than you probably think, the red-headed demon fox stated with a smirk, finishing off the last of her food and handing the tray off to another clone. With my clones, I don't have to worry about insurance, getting embezzled, call-outs, labor shortages, or any of those other little nags that slow down business. They can cover everything from getting the materials I need and making the products I sell all the way to delivering them to the stores to be sold. And then there are my seals, of course. While she spoke, Kushina pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a bottle of ink from a drawer before laying it out across the desk. Dipping the tip of a claw into the ink, she quickly dragged it across the sheet in swift but deliberate motions, creating several intrinsic designs within a few moments. When she was done, the redhead placed the now empty inkwell onto the first design and tapped paper, causing the glass to disappear in a puff of smoke. She then tapped it again, making the bottle reappear in another puff. With these, I can have entire shipments fit in the palm of my hand. She taps another seal which starts sparking wildly, or I could use them to power up my factories. Another seal was activated that transformed the ink itself into a small puddle of pure water, and even clean dirty water. And all of that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, now I'm starting to see it. Vaggie's one regular eye kept getting wider and wider as it made more and more sense to the sinner how her girlfriend's vassal was able to make such profits. By sealing the shipments and carrying them by hand, her clones wouldn't need things like trucks, gas money, or storage spaces. Plus, she could avoid all sorts of fees and taxes that everyone else had too for moving things between rings. She could generate her own power, thus no electric bills, and with the cleaning seal she could pump water right from the source instead of through the overpriced plumbing companies. In layman's terms, Kushina had successfully sliced out most of the usual expenses that would have dragged out her earnings, all while having a totally loyal workforce that was guaranteed to never be short-staffed as long as the foxy businesswoman herself was around. And that's not even accounting for my recent land purchases in, Kushina began to say, only to be abruptly cut off by the loud ringing from the redhead's hellphone. Raising a brow, she pulled the device out and glanced at the screen, before immediately sighing upon seeing the caller ID. Ow, this baka again. What's wrong? Got another stalker or something? Vaggie asked jokingly, making Kushina roll her eyes before answering the phone. What do you want this time, asshole? I wouldn't take that tone with me. Ya broad. A male voice spoke on the other side, oozing with confidence and mirth yet with an edge of deadly seriousness. After all, we've got business to settle. As I've told you 100 times already, I would sooner jump in a lake of molten lead than ever do any kind of business with the likes of you, Kushina stated with a deadpan spreading across her face when the demon on the other end of the call just laughed mockingly. Well, y'all should have thought of that before coming down onto my turf without paying the proper tributes. You owe me a lot of overdue protection, money lady. Which I am never going to pay you, or have the piles of dead goons I've sent back to your doorstep not gotten that message through your thick skull? The Hellfox asked rhetorically, earning yet another laugh from the caller. Oh, you say that now, doll, but I've got a little bit of leverage over here that. Let me guess, you've just kidnapped my head distributor in greed, have them all snugly tied up right beside you, and are planning to barter their life in return for the aforementioned protection money? Kushina abruptly cut the man off while twirling a lock of her hair around a finger. Yes, but how the hell did you? Because that was exactly what I was hoping you'd do. You predictable dumbass, she cut in yet again, her prior annoyance suddenly melting away as her lips curled into a smirk. Goodbye, no last name. I will enjoy the peace and quiet that you being gone will bring me. Katsu. Katwa. There was an abrupt loud boom followed by a continuous long tone, signifying that the call had been dropped, until Kushina hit the hang-up button. Do I even want to know what that was about? Vaggie asked with a raised brow, making Kushina shrug as a giggle slipped past her muzzle. Just a little annoyance that needed to be taken care of, she stated before standing up, creating yet another clone that took her place as she stretched. But I think that's enough business talk. We should probably go check on the little ones before they flood the bathroom again or something. As long as Charlie hasn't joined in yet, we should be fine. Almost as if on cue, there was a distant sound of crashing, splashing, and laughter echoing out through the mansion. I just had to open my mouth, despite her words, a smile spread across Vaggie's lips as she followed Kushina's lead. End chapter. Omake. Whirlpool Combat. Kushina vs. Lilith Part 2. Winner Kushina. A bloodied and beaten Lilith barely stayed standing as an unharmed Kushina cracked her blood-covered knuckles. Finish her. Faster than one could blink, Kushina crossed the distance between her and Lilith, ramming a fist into the succubus queen's gut hard enough to launch her several feet into the air. Several golden chains erupted from the Hellfox's back and coiled around her opponent's limbs, waist, and neck, keeping her suspended in the air. Kinjutsu, holding up her hand, Kushina slowly started to close it as the chains tightened, making Lilith's face turn red. The redhead then clenched her fist completely ripping the Queen of Hell to pieces, raining down blood and viscera all over. Jiko no Rensa. Kushina dispelled her chains as she turned and walked away, leaving Lilith's torn-off head laying atop a pile of her own guts. As long as Charlie hasn't joined in yet, we should be fine. Almost as if on cue, there was a distant sound of crashing, splashing, and laughter echoing out through the mansion. I just had to open my mouth, despite her words, a smile spread across Vaggie's lips as she followed Kushina's lead. And now, Whirlpool County headquarters. The clicking of claws against tile rang through the air as a tall regal-looking avian demoness stalked along a long hallway. Her name was Stella, a member of the prestigious Goetia royal family who presided over much of the upper echelon in Hell's society. She stood at around 10 feet with white gray-tipped feathers, many of which formed a crest that hung off her head in a manner akin to long hair, long black curled eyelashes, a small pink beak, and glowing red eyes with no sclera and white pupils. Her attire was fitting for nobility, with a classic puffy-sleeved white and black dress, fingerless gray lace gloves that stretched almost all the way to her shoulders, and a small golden crown perched atop her head. And then there was the way she held herself, head up high while projecting an air of authority, grace, and superiority. All in all, everything about her just oozed strong, "I'm better than you and I know it" vibes, or at least almost everything. A deep frown marred Stella's lips while her brow furrowed in deep thought, contrasting the confident aura she tried to portray around herself. I can't believe that Mother has me going to barter with some measly overlord, the avian demoness thought with a scoff, wringing her wrists in annoyance as she stalked down the hall, ignoring a pair of succubi that politely greeted her as she passed them. And telling me that I must be utmost respectful to her. I do not care if this plebeian is the princess's precious pet, I should not have to lower myself to speaking to such a wretch like she was my equal. And why the fuck doesn't this Satan-damned place have a bloody elevator? The building had 117 floors and she had to go through every last one because some genius had not only neglected to add an elevator but also designed it so that the stairs leading up were always on the opposite side of the floor to where the stairs leading down were. And she had to go over almost half of them twice because she tried to skip to the top via portal earlier only to somehow end up right back at the first floor instead. So now not only was she annoyed but her legs were absolutely killing her. Despite her mental grousing, Stella did her best to keep a straight face when she finally reached the end and found herself standing before a set of decorative mahogany double doors that were inscribed with the iconic spiral of Whirlpool Company. The left one had a golden plaque embedded into it which read, CEO Uzumaki Kushina, in bold and, "Please knock before entering," in smaller text below. Raising her hand, the White bared her talons as the temptation to simply rip the door down surged through her. However, after taking a deep breath, Stella's fingers curled into a fist before she gently rapped her knuckles against the hardwood. "It's open." HMPH, doesn't even bother having someone answer the door, typical. Clicking her tongue in distaste, the geisha grabbed the doorknob and opened it for herself. Upon stepping inside, she was briefly caught off guard when she was greeted to the sight of an eloquent office that followed a mix of modern and traditional Japanese themes. The walls were classic shoji paper design. There was a zen garden filled with black sand that took up most of one corner of the room, and a large fish tank filled with various exotic fish took up another. And then at the center of it all was the woman of the hour Kushina Uzumaki, still dressed in her formal tux and seated behind a large cedar desk. She was right in the middle of finishing up a large stack of paperwork when she looked up to see the new arrival. "Ah, hello Stella, you're right on time. That is Lady Stella to you," the royal demoness stated coldly, before scowling when the hellfox simply smiled at her while steepling her fingers together. "So Stella, I've been told that your family wishes to renegotiate some prior business transactions we've had." Her scowl only deepened when Kushina blatantly ignored her correction, continuing to speak to her in an insultingly casual manner as if they were equals. Fortunately, before her temper could boil over though, she was snapped out of her anger by a sudden puff of smoke by her side. Jumping in surprise, she instinctively flared her feathers and bared her talons once more, only to quickly calm down when the smog cleared up to reveal a luxurious leather-backed chair that was just her size. "Please, take a seat. We have much to discuss." HMPH. Naturally Stella was more than a bit dubious about the offered chair, considering how it had appeared, and eyed it critically for several moments for any signs of trouble. When she didn't see anything suspicious though, the white-feathered avian reluctantly sat down, if only because she really didn't want to be standing anymore. She only just managed to bite down a relieved sigh upon sinking into the soft padding, both from finally being off her aching feet and because it was a really nice chair. At least she has good taste in furniture. "Now then, I believe you're here to renegotiate for the landholdings I purchased 6 months ago, right Stella?" Kushina asked once Stella had gotten all settled in. "That would be correct." The bird woman bit down a scathing remark as she reached into a hidden pocket inside her dress and fished out a thick folder that she tossed onto Redhead's desk. Dozens of papers spilled out which Kushina curiously perused through, finding copies of property deeds, sales records, and other such paperwork, all signed by her. Her attention was quickly stolen away though when Stella placed another paper down, an unsigned contract which bore a wax seal of Stella's family next to signature line. "My family wishes to offer you a new deal. We are requesting the right to use and occupy the lands you purchased in the Ring of Wrath for business and in return grant you a 3% royalty on all proceeds made." "Wow, just wow," Kushina muttered, hold a hand up to her snout in a failed attempt to hold in the snickers that slipped free. The frown on Stella's beak deepened as she clenched her fists when the redhead kept laughing even when she started to read the offered contract. "What's so funny?" "Oh nothing, it's just that you seriously couldn't have made that sound more scripted if you tried. I mean seriously you might as well been holding the papers you no doubt rehearsed that little spiel from still." Kushina's smirk only grew as she peeked over the document to see that her guest was quite literally turning red from barely suppressed rage. Her eyes were glowing so bright that most would have no doubt gone blind from a single glance while her claws sank into the armrests. "Let me guess, you couldn't think of a sales pitch for yourself, so you needed mommy and daddy to write one up for you? How dare you?" That was the last straw. Stella's appearance morphed into one far more monstrous, with jagged fangs erupting from her mouth, her arms becoming more wing-like with large sharp feathers, and a demonic blood-red aura as she surged from her seat. She slammed her hands down on top of the desk with such force that the whole room shook, though the desk itself remained surprisingly intact, before she got right up in a still smiling Kushina's face. "I will not be mocked by some pathetic damned soul. I will show you thine place, you insufferable whore." "Is that so? And here I thought your mother had specifically told you to be as nice as possible to me so I'd fall for your scam to steal all the land back." "Silence you vile disrespectful." Stella started to scream, spittle flying in Kushina's face with each word, only to abruptly freeze when the demonic Vulpine's words registered in her mind. Like a switch was flipped, the avian White reverted back to her normal appearance as her anger faded away into shock. "Oh yes, I know exactly why you're here. Your mother pulled you aside yesterday and spun some tale about how I had scorned your family's honor. That she wished to teach me a lesson about daring to ridicule them, but needed your, and I quote, impeccable skill for negotiation, to pull it off, As she spoke, Kushina placed a finger on the tip of Stella's beak and gently pushed the shocked demoness back down into her seat. Specifically, you were sent to get me to agree to this deal while the rest of your family got signatures from the residents living on the land, which would allow you to exploit an old legal loophole that'd default the land I purchased back to their original owners, leaving me with nothing. Every word that left the redhead's lips caused Stella's eyes to widen further and further. How do you? Of course, what they didn't tell you was that the whole thing is a complete load of horseshit and they just needed to keep you distracted so you wouldn't notice them pulling off their real plan. Kushina said, smirking at the completely lost look that appeared on her guest's face. What are you talking about? What real plan? The royal demoness demanded once she managed to regain her composure, her eyes narrowing as she glared at the hellfox suspiciously. Normally she would have just dismissed whatever lowly sinner had to say, as if they had anything worth saying. But the conversation with her mother she spoke of, there should have been no way that she knew so much about it, not when it had happened in the privacy of her home. And yet she did. Their plan to get themselves out of the enormous amount of debt they're currently sunk in, of course. Debt? Stella parroted. What nonsense are you blathering about? My family is one of the wealthiest in all of hell. There is absolutely no way we could be in debt. Is that so? A golden chain emerged from Kushina's bag and zipped across the room to a filing cabinet before just as swiftly retracting with an enormous stack of paperwork. It then proceeded to drop all of them right in front of Stella, who actually had to crane her neck a little just to see the top. That's odd because these would beg to differ. As the chain retracted, it dislodged a single sheet of paper which fell onto the avian demoness's lap. Picking it up, she idly read it over curiously, only for her jaw to drop straight to the floor almost the instant she got through the first sentence. Said paper was a bank statement, but not just any bank statement. It was one for her own personal bank account, as evident by her name, address, and other such information emblazoned across the top, along with a long list of purchases she had made in the last month. The fact this woman had a copy of this was alarming enough, considering that only her brother, and her parents should have any form of access to this information. However, that paled in comparison to her shock at seeing the long list of blood-red numbers after every purchase, all the way down to her final balance. This isn't possible. It can't be. According to the page, she was not only broke but well over 1 million souls in the hole since last week. That doesn't make sense. I haven't been spending any more than usual and Andrealphus always makes sure to keep me set, so, where's all my money? Tossing the paper aside, Stella grabbed several more from the stack to find more statements along with overdue bills, unpaid invoices, and even foreclosure notices. And every single one of them were listed for a different relative of hers, including her brother Andrealphus, who was apparently even further in debt than she was. Digging further only met with the same results: family, friends, associates, almost every single demon in her social circle, all broke. This doesn't, but where could have, how could this, what? The white A mumbled out incoherently while frantically switching from one paper to another. Eventually she just shoved them all aside, scattering them across the room as she breathed heavily. This has to be some kind of trick. You're lying. It's... Click, we must act fast. If we do not find a way to rectify this situation soon, then we'll be left more destitute than imps. Stella's words died in her throat as the dreadfully familiar sound of her brother's voice rang out through the office. Turning to the source, she found a still smiling Kushina now holding a recorder up for the white A to see. How? You see, one of the real reasons your family along with most of the other royal families have managed to stay in power for so long has been thanks to a series of important monopolies they've held. Sure. Some like your husband hold important mystical knowledge and relics that are crucial to keeping things running smoothly, but for the rest it was all business, the Hellfox explained as she clasped her hands together. Everything from the farms in Wrath that grow food to the toll booths needed to transport things between the different rings to even the factories and stores. All under the thumb of the royal families for centuries. Getting up from her seat, Kushina strolled over to a cabinet in the corner, one of her chains slinking across the floor and turning Stella's chair to follow her. However, with long-standing success inevitably comes complacency and then ignorance until most members of the royal family, well, became you to put bluntly. Care for a drink? She asked with a cheeky smirk as she opened the cabinet to reveal a vast assortment of liquors, wines, and spirits. What the hell do you mean, became me? Stella demanded, finally managing to collect herself once her brain caught the perceived insult. Did you know your husband is currently 20 floors down trying to get back custody of your daughter? What? Only to be thrown for a loop yet again when Kushina asked her that question back. Blinking a few times, her eyes lit up in pure rage as she shot up from her seat once more. You kidnapped my daughter, I will fucking kill you by MPH. In the blink of an eye several chains wrapped around the white A when she tried to charge at the Hellfox, binding her arms, legs, and beak. She tried to break out of them, but her magic refused to work, and struggling just made them constrict tighter until she toppled over with a heavy thud. Easy to distract, quick to jump to conclusions, and incapable of impulse control. That's what I meant by they became like you. Kushina waved her hand as she spoke, causing her chains to hoist the bound demoness into the air while pouring herself a saucer of sake. Ignoring the venomous glare Stella gave her as she kept struggling in vain, the Vulpine lady casually made her way back to her desk and retook her seat. Firstly, I didn't kidnap your daughter, your brother sold her to me yesterday. MPH. That caused the avian demoness to freeze, her eyes widening in disbelief as her bindings aside from the ones around her beak went slack and she was unceremoniously dropped back into her chair. Before she could even try anything again though, the redhead dropped a set of photos onto the desk right in front of her. One showed her husband Stolas, a tall lanky owl demon with predominantly grayish-blue feathers, 4 eyes, a long red cloak trimmed with white and black fluff, and a crown mixed with a top hat. The picture showed him talking with a demon, a cat-like sinner she didn't recognize, inside a warehouse while handing over a suspicious duffel bag. The second picture appeared to be the exact same scene at first glance aside from having an unusual blue tint. However, it didn't take her long to notice that Stolas was translucent, faded, and in his place sat the familiar blue and white feathered visage of Stella's beloved brother Andrialphus. I'm sure you have a lot of questions but we're on a bit of a tight schedule, so why don't I just lay it all out for you plainly? Kushina snapped her fingers, causing the lights to dim and a hidden projector to hum to life, playing across the wall behind the red-furred Vulpine. To summarize a lot, thanks to some let's say creative business practices my company has grown quite rapidly since I started it. It was thanks to those same practices that your family, among many other royals, found themselves with noticeably less money going their way last year. As she was talking, various images were displayed on the projection, mostly various shots of Whirlpool County products and many demons using them. However, a few did include things like income reports and a few shots of different Goetia and other demonic royalty. It wasn't too much at the time, just enough to raise a few concerns and suspicions, though most of them just assumed another of the 72 houses was screwing them. So, they dismissed it as unimportant, made a few adjustments to balance things out, and carried on until things fixed themselves. And that's likely how it would have been, since even my little tricks couldn't get around the sheer monopoly you guys had. They owned practically the entire Wrath Ring after all, so no matter what I always had to go through you guys in some way to keep things going. But the projection changed, this time to show a series of different upper-class demons, all of them signing a contract offered by a succubus in a Whirlpool County uniform. It would seem that with great wealth comes great impatience, as many of your fancy-pantsy noble friends just couldn't stand to wait a bit for things to get sorted. So, 6 months ago, they had the genius idea to sell off what they saw as worthless land for a quick infusion of cash. Unfortunately for them, but most fortunate for me, this supposed worthless land happened to be in, you guessed it, Wrath. It was child's play from there to nip out the last few pesky Klingons your little group had left, completely cutting them out of the equation. The projector showed more uniformed succubus, this time taking to farmers whose land now bore the iconic spiral logo, sitting in toll booths, and other such things. It then turned off as the lights brightened and Kushina leaned forward with a smirk on her muzzle. With their precious monopoly broken, over half the royal families suddenly found their income dried up practically overnight. Naturally they assumed it was a mistake, kept spending, and expected things to sort out, but it didn't. And that all leads up to now. With a flick of her wrist the chain around Stella's beak unbound, allowing her to speak again. However, for once the White had nothing to say, no scathing remark, no rebuttal, she just sat there silently absorbing what the former Kunoichi was telling her. Your family was one of the hardest hit by all of this, and as it stands are about a week from being forced to declare total bankruptcy. Of course, as you can imagine, they'd rather die than have to publicly admit they're broke, and due to a lower-class demon, no less, so they concocted a little scheme of their own to get back on the top. There was a brief puff of smoke which quickly faded to reveal a whiteboard with a diagram and, your family's fucked up idea, scrawled across the top. Raising a pointer, that was definitely not in her hand a second ago, Kushina gestured to a picture of a young 4 or 5-year-old owl demon girl. Step 1. Wait till you're watching your daughter Octavia then distract you with a fake job so they can kidnap and sell her for a quick infusion of cash unnoticed. She moved to a picture of an owl demon that looked like a far more menacing version of Stolas, which had the word divorce written beside it. Step 2. They send Stolas on a wild goose chase to find Octavia, then frame him for selling her so his father Paimon agrees to a quick divorce and hefty settlement since they are still loaded. Speaking of which. The door opened as an imp rushed into the room, setting a new document on Kushina's desk, before bowing and rushing out. Ah, right on time. Congratulations Miss Goetia, you're officially single again as of 5 minutes ago, Kushina said while slapping the document, an official divorce certification, onto the space she'd just been pointing. She then moved down to the second to last set, which showed her father talking to a grotesquely large demon who looked like some strange mix of fly and man. Finally we reach step 3, which your parents are no doubt trying to get done as we speak, marrying you off to a rather wealthy demon down in Gluttony for a hefty price. You may have heard of him. His name is Beltran Chilean, otherwise known as the Bride Eater. The windows of the office and the sake saucer in Kushina's hand shattered from the sheer force of Stella's horrified scream. All of the demoness's feathers puffed out at once, making her look nearly twice as large as she really was, while her pupils narrowed to narrow dots that were nearly impossible to see. Grabbing the sides of her head, her whole body started shaking as she began to hyperventilate, not that Kushina could blame her. Beltran was one of the most infamous members of the royal households due to his rather unusual taste in meals. Specifically, his hobby of buying extremely beautiful women to get married to, and then eating them during the wedding. Just last month he'd married an extremely gorgeous succubus whom he had served as a stew after the ceremony. They're marrying me to the Bride Eater. Why the fuck would they do that? He'll fucking eat me out. That's what they're hoping for, genius, Kushina stated with a shake of her head, digging a finger in her ear to stop the ringing while she had a chain bonk Stella's head. Thankfully the jolt seemed to knock some sense into her, at least enough that she stopped screaming so the redhead could continue. Beltran was willing to pay top dollar for a royal bride to enjoy, and with you gone all the money from the divorce settlement would go to your immediate family instead. Add in that your own debt would die with you then. For all intents and purposes, sweetie, you are simply more valuable dead than alive. But that's preposterous. I have. What of my brother? Andrielphus would never let me become some disgusting glutton's lunch. The demonic birdwoman stated after taking a few deep breaths, trying to regain some of her composure. Well, you'd be right about that. Your dear brother actually does intend to intervene, Kushina said with a nod, getting Stella to perk up a little. Just not in any way you'll be happy about. And right back to dread. Do I even want to know what that's supposed to mean? Probably not, but I'll tell you anyway, the redhead stated while using pointer to gesture to the last slot on the whiteboard, labeled, Secret, Last Step, the Swap. On it was a set of 3 photos, one of Stella, one of another avian demon who looked a bit like her but with predominantly green feathers and white undertone, and the last was a fancy bedroom surrounded by etheric golden bars, full of sex toys, and Stella chained to a bed. Before the white-a could wrap her head around that last part, Kushina tapped the second one to get her attention before she continued. Recognize her? She's my cousin Tulip. She died in some stupid accident a decade ago. What about her? Because she's not dead, not yet at least. Doesn't she just look delighted about it? Kushina asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she peeled the third picture off the board and held it out for Stella to take. Accepting it with trembling hands, the white-a still felt a mix of unnerved and confused at seeing herself caged up. The picture showed her laying on a fancy bed, bound to it by a blessed collar and chain around her neck, while dressed in expensive, and naturally very revealing, lingerie. And as noted before, there were a lot of different types of sexual aids laying about, from classic dildos to a studded wooden horse. However, once she took a closer look, it didn't take long for Stella to notice some things that were off about the Stella in the photo. Notably, her beak was far less pronounced and missing the pink coloration, some of her feathers had an incredibly faint greenish tint in various spots, and her crest flared sideways rather than downwards. The most distinctive difference though were the eyes, where instead of her normal round white pupils there were emerald irises with slit pupils that stared at her completely broken and lifeless. Quite the uncanny likeness, huh? Seems your brother has quite the knack for abduction, as he Andrielphus kidnapped and faked poor Tulip's death so he could keep her in his personal playroom, not long after your official wedding to Stolas. My guess is he figured since he couldn't have the real you all to himself, he'd just have to settle for a look-alike. But then recent events came along and Andy saw an opportunity. It wasn't clear if Stella heard anything Kushina was saying as she just kept staring at the photograph with an ever-growing look of horrified realization. Fun fact. He was the one who pitched this whole plan to you parents when the money ran dry in the first place, convinced them that you were just dragging them down with your reckless spending while neglecting to mention that he made sure you never knew that money was tight. And no, he wouldn't. When it came time for your quote, wedding day, he plans to swoop in at the last minute and switch you with Tulip around under the guise of a rescue. The redhead continued as her whiteboard and pointer disappeared. Of course you'd trust him, you always have after all, so by the time you realized something was up, that would really be you in that picture. The family gets out of debt and your beloved brother gets to have you all to himself like he's always wanted. Everyone wins, well except for you of course, you'd get to spend the rest of your life dealing with this. With a snap of her fingers the projector came back to life, this time playing an actual video clip of. What's your name? Stella Ack. That's right, now take it like a good little sister. Okay. Turn it off, Stella pleaded, prompting Kushina to snap her fingers again, cutting the feed. Why are you telling me all of this? Because, now that you know all of that, ripping the contract the avian demoness had given her to shreds, the Hellfox burned the remaining bits and dropped their ashes into the trash. She then proceeded to pull out an entirely new contract from a drawer and laid it out before her guest. We can get to some real business. I'm listening. Meanwhile, whilst Stella began to negotiate with Kushina for real, 20 floors down Stolas and another Kushina could be found making their way down a hallway. The owl-like demon was noticeably on edge, constantly fidgeting with his hands, and his feathers kept fluttering under a non-existent breeze. He also looked a complete mess with his clothes all disheveled like he'd just slapped them on without a care. I'm really sorry that I didn't tell you what was happening sooner, Stolas, the redhead beside him said as she gave him a supportive pat on the arm. I wanted to, but I couldn't risk it. If your in-laws overheard, then they might have also found out that I had intercepted the real buyer and... It's okay, Kushina, I understand, Stolas cut in while sighing deeply as he rubbed the back of his neck. Besides, the fault is as much my own. I was well aware that my extended family was in dire straits financially. I should have foreseen that they'd try something like this to get back on top again. I just never imagined they'd actually stoop so low. All that matters to me right now is that Octavia is okay. She is okay, right? A little bit groggy from whatever your brother-in-law used to sedate her, but otherwise fine last I checked, Kushina stated, getting Stolas to sigh once more, this time in relief. I told her that she fell asleep when you were bringing her over for another playdate with Naruto and Luna. Thank you. The prince nodded his head in appreciation at that. He didn't even want to imagine how traumatizing this situation could have been for his daughter. Better to let her remain blissfully ignorant of the danger she'd been in, at least until she was old enough to understand. No problem. Anything to help out a friend and business partner, the demonic fox said while she patted his arm again before folding hers behind her back with a sly smirk. Speaking of which, we no longer need to keep our dealings under the table anymore, do we? Now that got Stolas to perk up a little as a tiny vindictive grin appeared on his lips for a few seconds. I do believe you are correct, Kushina. That's right, he and Kushina had been doing business together for quite some time now, roughly 5 months to be exact. It had all started shortly after the kunoichi-turned-businesswoman had gone around buying up land in wrath. Unlike his fellow royalty, who focused mostly on blaming each other for the sudden loss in profits they suffered from, he had actually bothered looking outside their usual social circles for a cause. Thanks to that, he was able to find that those who were getting hit the hardest were those that recently sold land. What was more impressive was that, despite her using various third parties, disguised clones, to buy said land, Stolas had somehow managed to track them all back to Kushina. However, rather than report his findings to the rest of his family, the Goetia prince had opted to confront her himself. But much to the redhead's pleasant surprise, he did not try to coerce or convince her into giving the land back. Instead, he pitched a deal, offering his knowledge and services in the vast arts of demonic mysticism in return for a set percentage of Whirlpool Co.'s income. His reasoning? He'd seen how fast the numbers were dropping in the Goetia bank accounts and knew there was only so much time until his own finances were at risk. But he also knew that it was unlikely that anybody in his family would take him seriously if he said that a sinner was responsible for their misfortune until it was too late. He couldn't risk that, not with a daughter to care for and way too many potential enemies just waiting for a moment of weakness to get him. So, he did what none of them were able to do. He sucked up his pride and did what he needed to do, even if it meant sucking up to a lower class. Fortunately for him, Kushina was not only willing to listen but respected his choices, which made things much easier. In the end, she agreed to the deal on 2 added conditions, the first being that he bring Octavia over on occasion to have playdates with her own children, which he easily agreed to. The second, and more serious, requirement was that he'd keep their deal under wraps until the time came and then legally disavow himself from the Goetia. Admittedly, that wasn't a particularly hard choice for him either, considering he was already considered a social outcast amongst his peers, even his own father. And recent events had only served to destroy any hesitations he might have had left about severing those ties. How long to make it official? He asked, causing Kushina's smirk to grow even bigger. I can have workers over within the hour. Give me 2-3 days tops to get all the new bells and whistles set up. Good, then, Stolas started to say, only to cut himself off when a loud squeal echoed through the hallway. Octavia. Without hesitation, the owl demon bolted towards the source, zooming down the rest of the corridor in the blink of an eye, where a large set of heavy-duty double doors stood in his path. They didn't stay standing for long though, as a single snap of Stolas's finger instantly reduced them to worthless piles of splinters as he rushed by. Only to stop cold when he found himself in a large colorfully painted indoor playground filled with toys, a ball pit, 3-story climbing playset with dozens of plastic tunnels, and other such things. Haha. Looks like I caught the birdie. Hee hee hee. Stop it, that tickles. Hee hee hee. However, his attention was solely focused on his little girl, who was giggling like crazy as she was held up by a female fox-like demon who wasn't Kushina. Like the redhead, she had digitigrade legs, large fluffy ears, and snout. However, her fur was predominantly yellow with pink strips and black around her arms and legs in a drip-like pattern. She also appeared to be part bee, with 2 sets of arms, a pair of antennae atop her ears, and small bug wings on her back. However, that was nothing compared to her hair, tail, and stomach, all 3 of which appeared to be made out of some kind of honey that floated in the air while constantly changing colors alongside a bang of colorful flames between her ears. She had a big grin on her face as she mercilessly tickled the little owlet in her grasp, laughing as she made her squeal uncontrollably. Oh well, look who's finally here. Her cheerful mood didn't falter for even a second after noticing the new arrival, though she did stop her assault. Once she could stop laughing and caught her breath, Octavia followed the foxy demon's gaze curiously before smiling brightly upon seeing her father standing by the doorway. Daddy. That cry snapped Stolas out of his stupor, and he wasted no time hurrying over to his little girl when the other demoness set her down. The little owl demon's feet barely had touched the floor before she was scooped up into the prince's arms. Oh, my sweet owlet, you have no idea how happy I am to see you right now, he mumbled as he hugged her tightly with tears welling up in his eyes. However, he quickly wiped them away before she could see them and looked her over in concern. How are you doing? Are you all right? It's been super fun. Octavia nodded rapidly with a big smile on her lips while waving her arms around excitedly. Ms. Uzumaki was really nice like always, and Naru was super fun, and Luna kept saying I smell fun. I was feeling really sleepy at first, then Ms. B showed up and gave me this yummy drink, and now we're playing hide and seek. Ah, I see. While he should have been concerned about the obvious sugar high his daughter was in, Stolas was simply too happy to be holding his daughter again to care. So, he just let her ramble on, not minding when she accidentally whacked his face with an arm as she tried to mime out everything she'd been doing. Nor did he pay any mind as the now named Bee walked past him and towards the destroyed doorway, where Kushina could be found talking to Luna. The young hellhound had an uncharacteristic smile as she whispered something while pointing to the multi-armed fox, causing her adoptive mother to burst into giggles. You wouldn't happen to be willing to fill me in on what's so funny now, would you, Kushi? Oh, nothing much. Luna was just telling me that you were playing hide and seek. Apparently my little maelstrom is the only one you haven't found yet, Bielsa. The redhead said between snickers while Luna tried, and failed, to hold back a fit of giggles. Yeah, well, that tyke has always been a tricky one, something he got from you no doubt, Bee retorted, shooting Kushina a faux accusatory glare at that last part which made her fellow fox hold her hands up in equally mock surrender. But make no mistake, I'm not one of the 7 sins for nothing. I'll be on his tail in no time. The bee-like fox trailed off at the end as her brow rose when Kushina and Luna started laughing even harder for some reason. In fact, the latter actually fell over and literally started rolling on the floor whilst the former leaned against the broken doorframe. Okay, seriously, what's so funny? Forget his tail, you should check yours. Luna barely managed to get out between fits of giggles, making Bee's eyebrow rise even higher. Check my tail? The hell is that supposed to? Yet again the blonde pinkette trailed off, this time as she looked over her shoulder curiously, only to blink in surprise when she noticed a little tube peeking out of her tail. Following it down with her eyes, she quickly discovered that said tube was actually a snorkel that was currently being used by a certain whisker-faced blonde child who was floating inside her honey-like appendage wearing goggles. There was a moment of silence, aside from the mother and daughter still raucous laughing, as Bee and Naruto just stared at each other for a few moments. Eventually the littler blonde waved his hand with what seemed like a sheepish smile. It was hard to tell with the snorkel in his mouth. Hey, hee ha 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 ha. It started out small, a light snicker here, a few giggles there, but it didn't take long until the dam burst, and Bee laughed her ass off. She cupped her gut with her lower arms as she doubled over a bit before willing her tail to curl around to her front so she could grab the boy inside with her free hands. The honey-like substance sloughed off of him amazingly easy, leaving him completely dry after she fished him out. Aw man. Spitting out the snorkel once he was completely exposed, Naruto pouted and lifted his goggles so he could glower at Luna. Why'd you have to rat me out, sis? I was gonna win. Naturally he didn't get a response, considering the hellhound in question was still laughing herself silly, which only made him pout more while his cheeks puffed out cutely. Don't be mad, little party dude, I'd say you still won since I didn't find you by myself. His little pouting fest didn't last for long though, as he was soon broken from his thoughts by Bee ruffling his hair once she got her laughter under control. And you know what that means, right? We fly. The blonde cheered excitedly, eyes sparkling in joy as Bee gently tossed him up in the air, quickly spinning around so he landed on her back. He wrapped his arms around her neck while she hooked his legs with her lower arms while her free hands conjured up a candy rope to help hold him in place. "That's right, now hold on tight birthday boy, we're going for a ride," the honey-haired demoness declared, her wings fluttering blindingly fast with a soft buzzing before she shot into the air. Squeals of joy rang out as the duo zoomed around the room at blindingly fast speed, turning into naught but a speeding multicolored blur. "Did I hear right? It's your son's birthday?" Back on the ground, Stolas walked over to Kushina with Octavia still in his arms. The older owl demon seemed much calmer now, his ruffled feathers smoothed back down and his attire straightened out. "Yup, Naru turns 5 today. That's why you brought Octavia over to visit today, remember?" Kushina said, idly wiping a tear from her eye once her laughter petered out into a light giggle. "Yeah. Birthday party. Birthday party." Octavia cheered in her father's arms, clapping excitedly. Oh, right, my apologies, it slipped my mind," the soon-to-be former royalty said quickly with a nod once he caught what the redhead was doing. "You'll have to forgive me, I left his present at home." "Don't worry about it, Stolas, you can always give it to him later, besides, I don't think he'll be too worried about it anyway." Kushina waved off his apology as she smiled, her eyes pointedly drifting upwards to see Bee and Naruto now causally drifting by. The bee-like demon was laying in the air back down like she was floating in a pool while Naruto sat on her glowing belly snacking on the candy rope. Her gaze then dropped down when a light growling reached her ears to find that Luna had stopped laughing, her amusement replaced with annoyance. It was subtle, to most it'd look like she was just watching, but Kushina could see how the young hellhound's claws dug into the floor ever so lightly in the light tug of her lips. All in all, there was only one conclusion to be made in the mother's mind. "Ah, I think somebody's jealous, if you say so, though still, after all you've done for us, I could have at least remembered a gift," Stolas said, muttering the last part more to himself than Kushina, as he hugged his daughter just a little bit closer. Noticing the confused look she was starting to give him though, the older owl demon cleared his throat. "So is it safe to assume you've got more planned for today than just having the sin of gluttony pop in for a bit of hide and seek?" Yes it is. We just gotta wait for a couple more people to show up first," the hellfox said while gently scratching her hellhound daughter's scalp to calm her down. Almost as if summoned, there was a series of loud rapid steps before Charlie rushed in through the destroyed doorway with a comically large present in her arms. "Sorry, didn't mean, phew, to take so long," the princess of hell wheezed out between gasps for breath, setting the gift down so she could lean on it for support as she caught her breath. She conjured up a hanky to wipe the sweat that was all but pouring from her brow while two small demons, her personal protectors Razzle and Dazzle, fluttered around her with little hand fans to cool her off. "This place has too many stairs. Why didn't you just take the elevator then?" Kushina asked with a raised brow, jabbing her thumb at a seemingly plain and interesting wall as she spoke. However, not even a second later the plain wall started to ripple like water then fade away to reveal intrinsically designed elevator doors that slid open to reveal a bemused Vaggie, wearing a cheesy party hat and carrying a water bottle, and Lilith, who like her daughter was burdened by a very large present. "Oh right, I forgot about the elevator," Charlie muttered sheepishly, awkwardly waving to her girlfriend as the Greyette joined her, graciously accepting the water she offered her. "Maybe I shouldn't have run ahead like that, huh?" "You wouldn't be you if you didn't, hun," was all Vaggie said as she patted the blonde's shoulder supportively. "I figured you were just trying to get your daily steps in," Lilith stated jokingly while stacking her gift atop her daughter's, causing the younger blonde's red cheeks to glow a little in embarrassment. Fortunately, that was the only teasing she had to deal with as everyone's attention was drawn back to the wall as the elevator appeared again. This time though it was Stella and another Kushina to walk out, with the former looking an unusual mix of disgruntled and angry yet resigned and accepting. The white feathered demon had also changed attire, her large puffy royal gown replaced with a more casual yet still quite exotic looking black and white dress which bore a small red spiral above the heart. There was a flare of tension when Stolas and Stella's eyes met, the prince's gaze hardening as he moved Octavia behind him protectively while his now ex-wife flinched and stared at the floor. He didn't blame her for what her family planned, she was just as much a victim of their schemes as Octavia was after all. But that didn't mean he wasn't steamed that she didn't even notice their daughter had gone missing for over a day when she was supposed to be watching her. "And that's my K." The Kushina with Charlie, Lilith, Luna, Stolas, Octavia, and Vaggie said before she disappeared into a puff of smoke, revealing herself to be a clone. Meanwhile, the newly arrived Kushina giggled before bringing her fingers to her lips and whistling loudly, causing Bee to stop in midair. "Ah, looks like it's time for the party little dude," the fox-like demon said, cupping all four arms around Naruto as she dropped to the floor. At the same time, the rest of the group made their way over, Charlie and Lilith working together to move their gifts with some help from Razzle and Dazzle. Took you long enough. I was starting to think all those preparations were for nothing. Lady Beelzebub. Stella muttered in surprise upon seeing the sin of gluttony herself, and playing babysitter at that. Oh, how you wound me, Bee. After all the parties we've had together, you'd really think I'd leave you hanging like that? Kushina asked in a mock-hurt voice, dramatically grasping her chest as if she'd been struck. Well, there was that one time last year when, hey, that one was your fault for spiking the wrong punch. Touché. The bee fox conceded with a shrug, before blinking when she noticed her arms were empty. Whoa, Stella flinched when her vision was filled with Naruto's upside-down face. The blonde had somehow gotten on her shoulders without her noticing, his hands resting on her head as he peeked over at her curiously. You're so cool. What's your name? Are you friends with Via-chan? Can you fly? Do all birdie people get so tall? Can I pet you? I'll wear that, huh? The words seemed to get stuck in the regal demoness's mouth, her brain struggling to keep up with the hyperboy. Alright, sweetie, that's enough of that. Thankfully Kushina came to her rescue, grabbing Naruto around the waist and prying him off Stella. But I want to talk with the pretty bird lady more, he pouted as he was pulled away, making his mother snicker as she glanced at the still baffled Whitey. You can talk to the pretty bird later, sweetheart, the redhead said, a distinct teasing tone in her voice that passed over her son's head, while ruffling his hair with her tail. He was still pouting even as she set him down beside his sister, who immediately helped him climb onto her back while still glowering at a certain honey-haired sin. As B said, we got a party to get to. Everyone ready? Yes. Now stop stalling. Vaggie stated dryly while everyone else nodded, or in Octavia, Charlie, and B's cases cheered. Alright. Kill my fun, why don't you? Rolling her eyes in amusement, Kushina held up a hand as it was engulfed in an etheric white-blue fire. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the Vulpine demon flung the flames into the air towards the center of the room where they rapidly expanded. The mystical fire started to spin, twisting around faster and faster until it formed a fiery disk that shimmered strangely in the center. Come on then, Kushina said, taking Luna's hand before they stepped through the newly created portal together. Oh, I wonder where we're going. Charlie exclaimed before hopping through after them, gifts in tow, missing the knowing looks on Vaggie and Lilith's face as they followed after the excited blonde. Only one way to find. Enough quips. Let's fucking go already. B cut Stolas off as she grabbed him and Stella and dragged them through the flaming disc. XXXXX. Whoa. Charlie's eyes were literally sparkling upon coming out the other side of the portal to find herself on a gorgeous beach. The sand was perfectly smooth and stretched far in both directions, calm ocean with gentle waves slowly splashing across the shore, and a lush jungle forest full of life. There was also a lovely beach house nearby which had the Uzumaki spiral proudly painted on a sign hanging above the front door. Meanwhile, around the house had been decorated with tiki torches, tables with snacks and drinks, lots of balloons, and a big banner reading, Happy 5th Birthday Naruto. What got her attention the most though was the sun that shone brightly in the sky, feeling so warm yet oddly gentle on the demoness's pale skin. We're having the party on Earth. Awesome. Surprise. Vaggie said while patting Charlie's shoulder, smiling at her girlfriend's genuine excitement. Oh, this is great. I've been wanting to come up and wait, the bubbly blonde started to say as she hopped in place, only to suddenly freeze mid-sentence with her eyes widening in realization. Dropping her gift, which was thankfully caught by Razzle and Dazzle before it hit the sand, she whirled around to face her one-eyed girlfriend. How are you on Earth? Sinners can't leave the Pride Ring, let alone hell. Yeah, well you can thank Kushina for that. As she spoke, Vaggie blushed a little and glanced at the rest of their group to make sure no one was looking. Fortunately, they were all preoccupied already. Kushina and Stolas gone over to the water's edge where Naruto and Octavia were happily splashing in the shallow water. Luna had somehow gotten herself caught in B's arm as the Sin, Lilith, and Stella chatted at the punch table. With the coast clear, the moth-like girl grabbed the hem of her shirt before slowly lifting it up just enough to reveal her lower belly. This also revealed a little black spiral surrounded by tiny kanji too small to read which was said just beneath her belly button. Or to put in layman's terms, Vaggie had a womb tat. Ooh, that's so cool. Vaggie's cheeks grew even redder as Charlie knelt to get a closer look, holding back a shiver when the princess poked at the seal. I've got to get her to teach me how these work one of these days. How about next week then? Eep. Gak. Both girls jumped in surprise when Kushina spoke right beside them, causing Charlie to accidentally tackle her girlfriend when she tried to stand up too fast. The Hellfox had a big cat that ate the canary grin as she stood over the pair as they struggled to get untangled in the sand. Having fun already, you two? Oh, just a blast. I love having sand in my panties. Vaggie grumbled sarcastically once she and Charlie managed to get untangled, dusting themselves off the best she could while clambering back to their feet. Well then, Kushina's grin widened, causing a sense of dread to wash over the grainet. In that case, how about a wash? Wah! Vaggie had no time to react before she was suddenly doused in seawater from behind. Spinning around, she found the culprits to be Naruto and Luna, both armed with big water guns and dressed in swimsuits. Gotcha anti-vagini, the whiskered boy declared with a grin, causing his sister to double over in laughter. Oh why you little. The demoness didn't know when the water gun was handed to her or who gave it to her. Nor did she particularly care anymore about her new tattoo being exposed as she ripped her drenched clothes off to reveal a black bikini underneath. All she cared about was shooting it at the laughing duo as she chased after them. Get back here. I told you brats not to call me that. Hey. Wait for me. Charlie called out after them, using her magic to quickly change into a red and white polka dot swimsuit. Hee hee hee. Oh to be young and in love, Kushina muttered, sighing nostalgically while watching her children and their godmothers run all over the beach. Water went flying everywhere as Naruto rode on Luna's shoulders so he could shoot at Vaggie and Charlie while she kept running. The ladies weren't taking that laying down though as Vaggie fired back with amazing accuracy, repeatedly nailing both kids despite their best efforts. Charlie on the other hand opted for throwing water balloons she got from B with not so successful results. Asterisk sploosh asterisk. Charlie. Whoops, sorry Vaggie. Well unless you call hitting everyone and everything but the ones she was aiming for successful. And before long Octavia and Stolos got dragged into the mess, courtesy of a stray shot blasting the former right in the face. So the father-daughter duo retaliated by making it rain water balloons everywhere as they laughed. Now if only Vaggie could just tell Charlie the truth. XXXXX, and so I was like, you're asking me to throw a party for a 6-year-old? And Kushi just says, that's right, with a totally straight face. Honestly I thought she was pulling at first but nope, she legit wanted me to throw a kid's party, B said with a laugh as she, Stella, and Lilith sat together at a table. The gluttonous demon pounded her fist on the table while she drank from a huge coconut drink with a super long crazy straw. So of course I was like, sorry but I don't do kiddie parties, maybe when your girl is a bit older, but she just did not take no for an answer. So you know what she does? She challenges me to a drinking contest. Me? Says if I lose then I have to do the party and if she loses she'd clean up after my parties for a year. I could not believe the fucking balls on her. I'm guessing you lost then? Stella asked curiously, biting back her displeasure at the sin's manners, or lack thereof, as she hoped to learn more about her new employer. Honestly we have no idea who won, B admitted with a chuckle. We drank non-stop for a week straight, then the next thing I know we're waking up in my house covered in barf and one hell of a hangover. I couldn't believe it, that chick managed to get me of all people, blackout drunk. I have never gotten blackout drunk before. So she agreed to throw the party and now here we are, 5 years later and she's helped with every one of Naruto and Luna's birthdays. Lilith finished for B as the fox-like demon burst into laughter again. Fuck yeah, she may not look it but that gal can fucking party. That does sound impressive, the white-feathered avian muttered with a nod, sliding a bit away to avoid getting slashed as booze sloshed out of B's cup. And you said she owns this island? How? I doubt humans accept hell money. Oh you would be surprised what people will take as payment, but yeah, calming down, B took another sip from her drink, only to frown when she found it empty. It wasn't a problem for long though as she tossed it aside and conjured up a fresh one before continuing. She simply started up business up here as well and things kind of worked out better than planned. See, the plan was to start off selling hooch like before but then she found this really shitty pizza/robotics company called Afron, AFK, something like that. Anyway she found them and just did a hostile takeover, emphasis on hostile. Meaning, she killed the entire board of directors, replaced them with clones of herself, had them, officially, hire her, rose up through rapid promotion. Then finally declared the new owner before they retired. Lilith explained while sipping at a glass of wine. Good riddance to bad rubbish if you ask me, total bastards. I helped, mostly with disposing the bodies. B added while idly picking at her teeth with one of her claws. I'm not touching that one. Stella thought, shaking her head at the implications of how the sin of gluttony disposed of people. She had enough nightmare fuel to last the next couple of centuries as it was. What about heaven? Should we not be worried about them taking exception to such extensive demonic presence in the living world? Huh? Are you kidding? Those cloud-loving goody-goodies should be thanking us for this. Reaching behind her back, B pulled out a thick stack of papers from somewhere and dropped it in front of the royal bird. This right here is just the short list of bullshit those fucks were doing before Kushi took over. Staring at the documents, Stella could not deny that she was curious about what could be so bad that heaven might excuse a sin on earth. But another part of her was screaming at her that she really didn't want to know, especially considering how the last few piles of paperwork she'd gone through had gone. However, in the end the bird demon grabbed the stack once her curiosity won out and she skimmed over the first page. Oh, she flipped to the next page. Oh my, her eyes widened as she went to another page. The fuck? Her jaw dropped in disbelief, flipping through page after page until she finally reached the end. What the fuck? How did these guys get away with all this shit for so long? Bribes, intimidation, blackmail, the perks of being rich and well-connected. All they had to do was throw enough money at the problems till they went away, Lilith stated, with Stella nodding in understanding. Anyway, after gutting out the old management, and most of the staff, Kushina cleaned house, got rid of all that shit they were doing for good, fixed the messes, performed a few exorcisms for good measure. She'd only just started turning a real profit a few months ago. Yep, thanks to one of the few good things in that scrap heap left us to work with, B said with a snort, before grinning brightly when she noticed the door to the beach house swing open and someone stepping out. And speak of the devil, it's about time you stopped hiding in there, get out here girl. Following the sin's gaze, Lilith and Stella saw a tall anthropomorphic wolf lady with fluffy gray fur, long silver hair with a dyed green bang, matching tail, bright golden eyes, and distinctive black markings on her cheeks. Looking about her early 20s, she wore a punk rock-themed yet modest two-piece swimsuit that was mostly black with spiky red patches. She had studded punk bracelets on each wrist with matching collar, and 2 earrings in each ear, a stud and hoop each with purple on one ear and black on the other. In her arms was a fancy silver tray with a matching lid that she took extra care not to jostle around as she closed the door behind her. Peering around, the canine gal seemed to be nervous for some reason before slowly walking out, making a beeline straight for the trio. "I'm sorry ma'am," she mumbled while setting the tray down between them and nervously scratching her cheek. "I just couldn't decide what to wear. I didn't mean to." "None of that ma'am stuff, it's B. And stop worrying so much, you look fantastic Roxy. Now come on, take a seat, have some fun. This is a party after all." B cut Roxy off, literally pulling her into a chair while shoving a drink and a wad of cotton candy into her hands. "All right, B, if you say so," the wolf lady muttered, taking a hesitant sip of the beverage she'd been given, before perking up when the taste hit her tongue. "Wow, this is what booze tastes like. It's amazing. No wonder people drink it so much. Just wait till I get you some of my personal brews, they will blow your mind," the bee fox stated with a grin as she draped an arm over the new girl's shoulders. "Oh, and you have got to try Cushy's homemade red bean soup, that stuff is to die for." Nodding, Roxy seemed like she was about to say something, only to be interrupted by a slender hand that was offered to her, courtesy of Lilith. "You must be Roxanne Wolf. I don't believe we've met in person yet. I'm Lilith, Lilith Morningstar." "That's right, though I prefer to go by Roxy," the punk canine said with a smile, accepting the handshake, before turning to Stella. "And you are?" "Stella, it's a pleasure." One could literally hear the bird struggling to keep herself polite as she shook Roxy's hand, a fake smile on her lips which unnerved Roxy. Pulling her arm back, she couldn't help but scooch away from the former royalty a bit, at least until she was yet again pulled into a hug by a certain sin. "Don't mind her, she's just getting used to not having this up her ass anymore," B said jokingly, playfully holding up an actual 10-foot pole that she jabbed against Stella's tail feathers, making the white A fall out of her seat with an indignant squawk. Waiting for her to climb back up, the honey-haired demoness ruffled the canine's hair before popping Stella on the head. "And you be nice, Roxy just got done being remodeled and she's feeling a little self-conscious." "I didn't even say, what do you mean by remodeled? How do you remodel a hellhound?" "Who ever said she's a hellhound?" B gently elbowed Roxy's side as she spoke, giving her a knowing look that made the silver-haired wolf sigh. Opening her jaws wide, Roxy reached in with a thumb and pressed against the roof mouth until there was a soft clicking noise. This was followed by her eyes flashing several different colors before her nose popped out with a hiss and split in two, exposing a USB slot underneath. "Oh, she's a robot," Stella thought, slowly nodding her head as the light bulb lit up in her head, plus B holding up a picture next to Roxanne of what she assumed was what the wolf woman used to look like. Whereas now she was effectively indistinguishable from a hellhound, or other such bipedal canine, the picture depicted her as similar looking but blatantly robotic. Like I said, this cutie here was one of the few good things that came out of that wretched dumpster fire of a company. I mean, just look at that face. The gluttony demon cupped the revealed robo-wolf girl's cheeks, squishing them together while closing her nose back up for her. Her words caused Roxanne to flush in embarrassment, and she tried to wiggle free of B's grasp. However, she was simply no match for the demon's raw natural strength. "Of course we had to get her fixed up first. Poor thing was all beat up and had one nasty little virus when we found her. Absolutely deplorably what they made her MPHT. Whatever else B was gonna say would be left unheard thanks to Lilith, who pinched the Sin's lips shut before prying poor Roxy free. Ahem, and if I heard right, Kushina has made you the new head mascot and namesake for her restaurants, isn't that correct? She asked in a clear attempt to change the subject, noticing the guilt and sadness flashing across the Silverette's face. Something B seemed to finally pick up on once Lilith got her to stop talking and quietly sank back in her seat once her lips were released. Yes, that's right. Thankfully Roxy was quick to cheer up, smiling softly as she took another sip of her drink. Ms. Uzumaki felt it was best to rebrand after, well everything and asked me if I'd like to take on the role. Why would she is, because she is my employee, not my slave. I will not force her to do something she's uncomfortable with, Kushina stated before Stella could even finish her question as she took a seat with the group, squeezing in between Lilith and Roxanne. Giving the wolf woman in question a pat on the shoulder once she got comfy, the kunoichi-turned businesswoman smiled before turning her attention to the silver tray. She carefully lifted the lid just enough to get a peek of what was underneath, her smile growing as she set it back down and gave Roxy another pat. Speaking of which, thank you for helping with today, but are you sure you're okay? I know you're still adjusting and all that. It is no problem, Ms. Uzumaki, honest. The Silverette waved off the concern with a smile of her own. All right. Then if everyone's ready, bringing her hand to her lips, Kushina whistled loudly, causing the water fight at the beach to come to an abrupt stop. Naruto froze in the middle of reloading with Luna acting as cover armed with a bucket and balloons. Charlie fell flat on her face from trying to stop mid-run while Vaggie just managed to save herself from a similar fate. The most amusing was Stolas who, due to freezing in place, ended up getting nailed right in the face by a torrent of water courtesy of his daughter. Come on everybody, it's time to cut the cake. Cake. And just like that everyone was moving again as the little ones, and Charlie, all dropped their weapons, in favor of rushing to the table while the adults followed more sedately. It didn't take long for everyone to find their seats aside from a slight hiccup where Octavia wanted to sit with her mother. Stolas was naturally reluctant for obvious reasons but didn't say anything so as to not cause a scene, though he made sure to keep both of them in his line of sight at all times. And of course the birthday boy himself was put into the seat of honor, otherwise known as Kushina's lap, shaking with excitement as Roxanne started to raise the tray's lid. At the same time, the sun started to dip beneath the horizon, casting the whole party in a brilliant array of gold, orange, and red light. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. Naruto's face lit up when everyone, even Luna, started to sing together once the cake was revealed. Said dessert was a beautiful four-tiered cake decorated to look like the ocean depths with little fish, crabs, and other such sea life drawn in the frosting of the top 3 tiers while the bottom was covered in candy seaweed and brown sugar crystals that mimicked sand. And the very top was stylized to look like a whirlpool with a frosting boat that had 5 lit candles for masts. Happy birthday dear Naruto, happy birthday to you. Make a wish sweetie. Kushina whispered into Naruto's ear before lifting him up so he was level with the top of the cake. Still shaking at first, Naruto suddenly went totally still in his mother's arms and closed his eyes with his face scrunched up in thought. After a few moments he opened his eyes back up and blew out the candles while everyone cheered and applauded. Woo! Go little party dude, B exclaimed, poking the cake as she spoke, causing it to be briefly enveloped in a flurry of golden smoke before it grew to the size of a minivan. Now let's dig in. Who's got the knife? That'd be me. An amused Lilith said, holding up said knife while Roxanne prepped the timer on a camera and Vaggie held plates which everyone started trying to grab one of. Oh, can I get part of the boat? Please daddy? Easy now Octavia, wait your turn. I call dibs on that octopus, this looks so good. Excuse me but what exactly is in this cake? Well, it's a mix of. Whilst everyone was so caught up in getting their own plates none of them noticed as Naruto slipped off his mother's lap and tugged on Luna's arm. Once he had her attention he whispered something into her ear that caused the young hellhound's face to split with a smile before nodding and motioning for Naruto to climb on her back. Okay, everyone calm down, Kushina called out with an eye roll as she clapped her hands together, getting all the bickering to fall silent. We all know how this works. It's Naruto's birthday so he gets the first. Cannonball, Geronimo, Naruto and Luna declared at the same time as the latter jumped as high as she could into the air and landed right in the middle of the whirlpool of the birthday cake with a loud splat, sending frosting and sweets flying everywhere. Cut. The red-headed hellfox finished lamely, a dull look on her face as half a frosting clownfish slowly dripped off her head. Sighing, she and everyone else turned to look at her children who were laughing while throwing bits of cake at each other. They both froze though once they felt her gaze and ducked into the frosting till only the top of their heads were visible. Whose idea was that? Naruto's hand slowly rose up. Why, it was my birthday wish. He mumbled softly, earning a few laughs, mostly from Bea and Charlie. Well then, I guess there's only one thing to do in that case. Scooping up the goopy fish on her head, Kushina stared at the two mischief makers with a dead serious expression. SPL splat, gah, wah, and promptly hit them both right in the face with handfuls of frosting, blinding them. Reacting the fastest, Luna quickly wiped the sugary goo off her face, only to quickly look up upon noticing a shadow descending upon her. Flash a picture of Naruto and Luna in the cake is laid out, the former still wiping frosting off his face while the latter stares upward with wide eyes. The cause of this would be due to Kushina, Bea, Lilith, Charlie, and Octavia, who were all poised in various diving forms as they fell towards the giant cake. The end. Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.